forward to you looking like a mountain man, how you described it to me, like you were a coal miner or something. I was really stoked for it.
We're all coal
miners. Homeless fur trapper is what
a homeless fur trapper. Well, you married a French woman. That's all the more appropriate.
Yeah. I was trying to trap any number of furs in my youth. Yes. I was busy trying to fur trap. Well, I'm so happy to be here, gents.
Oh, well, we're really happy that you're here too. I mean, you're one of my favorite people to chat with anyway. So it's been too long as it is, and now you're making me really crave a cigarette. And I have a pack of American Spirits in my living room, but I'll do that later. I usually smoke outside.
Yeah, I should have brought mine, but I just have the gum. So
it's fine.
Yeah, I am absolutely a negative influence this evening. There's going to be a little snort of the old whiskey as well.
Well, it's only fair. It's the middle of December. It's crazy how fast this year has gone by, or it feels like it's gone by really quickly. I don't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a strange hammering pace. I mean, not just with my own life changes, getting married and everything, but
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But the broader world, and I'm sure you have both witnessed that closely.
Yeah, we've been paying attention. Partially, half the show is like the news for an hour, and then we cover whatever topic. So, I mean, every week, it's just like, well, what crazy shit did we see on Twitter? And it's like, well, I'm glad that you asked, because we're going to go break down all of that and try really hard not to lose our sense of sanity, because, how do we describe it? We're on Twitter, so our audience doesn't have to be.
Well, especially today, like, people were really, the knives are out, But let's not talk about that. That's too... We have an esteemed guest. Esteemed expert.
Am I allowed to curse on screen?
We're 2 minutes in. You're fine.
3 minutes. Wait for 3 minutes, and you could curse. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, fuck that! Yeah. Whatever you want to talk about, Oliver.
I was just saying.
I don't care at this point.
you have an expert in dissipation and wasted time, which is what sits before you. You see before you the ruins of a classical education. So please discuss whatever it is you would like. I know you both from.
Truly, I know how you feel, because I have your copies of the stuff that you gave me by my desk. So it's right here.
What do you got there, Prude?
It is. What did Oliver give me? It is University Records and Life in the Middle Ages by Lynn Thorndike.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
Thorndike also did the magisterial work, Magic and Experimental Science, in multiple volumes. It's up there. Yes, but I know Prude, having been on his channel, having had him on mine. You were much missed in the geopolitical sphere, since you haven't been doing as much with that, Prude.
I need to go back to it eventually.
Yeah, and when you do,
Gio's been picking up the slack.
Channel.
Well, all my geopolitical takes come from like the Duran, Intel Slavs. No, I'm kidding. Well, I'm not kidding actually, but we'll see.
But I know Gio now as well from discussing with him, learning about his sensitive artistic soul on D's late night spaces as well. So yeah, happy to be with you both here, face fagging full on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I haven't turned my camera on because all of the lights in my apartment bedroom are all like yellow and warm, so it looks like I have jaundice. I literally have this like ring camera light thing right in front of my computer desk, so I don't look like I'm dying of alcohol poisoning or something like that.
What's crazy is that all three of us, none of us made the Talmudic Network latest compilation with Patrick Bateman. None of us made it. We're not.
That's okay. I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it. I feel left out, but then I'm okay with it as well. If, like,
what is there, a SPLC or ADL report or something?
No, it's just Twitter infighting and drama.
People do it for free.
With mutuals like these, who needs the SPLC?
Yes. As a matter of fact. Yes.
It's true. But anyways, this is Digital Archipelago episode
112.
112.
I thought that the title was fitting. I called it The Lengthy Conversation because my favorite least terse person is our guest for tonight, a man whom I have met in person, a man who I've had a meal with and a drink with. He's a very good friend of ours. Oliver, how are you?
Magnificent.
Wonderful. And for the audience members who do not know you, and they are in trouble if they don't know you, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, I'm lost up in the forest now of Alabama, near the tail end of the Appalachian Mountains, and what I do is geopolitics and rampant speculation. I've been known for getting a few things right and very dramatically getting some things wrong. So your mileage may vary. I also do all sorts of off the cuff strangeness, like having a Black Sabbath retrospective, or looking at Robert E. Howard as an author, or Conan the Barbarian as viewed from the right. Once upon a time, I did some things more frequently having to do with esoterica and the rest, but it's mostly geopolitics, and then that's primarily on YouTube and X or Twitter. And then, occasionally late night, half drunken cryptic posts, via which I attempt to pierce the veil between the present and the future. Yes.
I think it was either Pierce the Veil or From First to Last that became like a pro-Trump, like Chud new metal band instead of like a metalcore band. So I think it was From First to Last. I could be wrong, but
I also probably shouldn't say I probably shouldn't be talking about fur trapping and piercing veils. In the same I don't know what's going on around here lately these days.
Honestly, that's how I feel all the time when I log into social media, or I go or if heaven forbid I'm out at lunch with my coworkers, they're like, "Did you see this thing on the news?" And I'm like, "You and I live in two different worlds. I need to know what news we're talking about." And then they'll reference something from Facebook, and I'm like, "I've got no idea. I haven't been on Facebook in years." I like to keep it that way. I don't have anything in my real name associated on social media platforms, and I'd like to keep it that way. Yeah, Prude's in Mexico for the stream. Yeah, outside of that little ring light, every light I have in here is that awful yellow. Actually, no, I really like this because you have to understand. I have these little blue light filter glasses that I wear at work because I have these god-awful sterile hospital neon fluorescent lights. And then I have a dual monitor setup, and I'm looking at Excel spreadsheets all day. And it is just awful. It makes me, and then I have to go straight off to, usually then I'm in church, and then it's really dim candlelight because it's the evening, and I'm trying to read music, and I'm just like, this is killing me. So if I want to mess with you, I'll put these on later just for.
You gotta get the red light filter on your computer. That's what my GF does.
The thing is that if I want to install that, they're like, "Well, you need to contact IT," and I'm just like, "Just let me do it myself. Don't give me the approval."
You have to contact IT to click on a feature.
It's frustrating.
Brutal.
It's that's corporate. So I can't even say it's corporate. It's government work for you. It's the worst. I don't recommend working in government.
Though, right?
Huh?
Job security, though, right?
That is true. The odds of me getting fired are really low because I'm actually really good at what I do.
Yeah, you'd have to
burrow your way in deep.
Fired.
Yeah, that is the one nice thing is job security. So I really can't complain. So I noticed that you were live earlier. I didn't get a chance to watch that stream, Oliver, but you were covering the great game, so to speak. I guess we can start off with some Geopole.
Yeah, I was just I had an opportunity to take a look at the you're well familiar with this, Prude, but there's the idea of Mackinder and Spickman, the idea of a heartland and the rimland, and based on that notion, you have Eurasia as this core area. And there's, in fact, even a further core of that's considered strategically most important. And that's what we have playing out in front of us, I think, is a continued push on these on the various rimland fronts towards Russia in order to knock it off balance or something along those lines. And so I spoke with a couple people that I've talked to in the past whom I find insightful. Prude not being as available as much these days, having a life and working for a living. But we talked about Russia a little bit, about the stands, about the situation in Syria, about what's been happening along the Black Sea coast, Georgia, some of the things in Ukraine, as well as Romania, the annulment or whatever it was of the election the repudiation of electoral results in the first round based on claims about, TikTok subversion. So, yeah, we covered a fair amount of that, and I've kept up on a number of things. I'm probably a bit weak right now on what's going on domestically, but Geopole, I can probably give you some fairly up-to-date takes. No claims regarding their originality in all cases.
I think it's sort of the beauty about the whole ecosystem is that unless you really know for sure, like you were on the ground when the take came out or you were in the chat or whatever, then, as long as whatever originality or sprinkle, I guess, it's almost like we've gone back in time of intellectual property law. Like as long as there's that flash of genius, like it's okay. Like your take can be somewhat original or it can be somewhat brought on from others, but it's always about building off of each other's works. We all stand on the shoulders of giants as it is anyway. Gio and I were talking about it last week. I think it was that Russians with Attitude clip about like the Russian soldiers just like driving through and seeing, like, the Syrian armed forces put down their arms, and you can hear them all cursing and swearing. And I think a lot of American service members were like first time, like we've been in this situation before.
Trying to teach Arabs how to fight. Whoa. Like that's
teaching the Middle East how to stand the ground. But I mean, even then, right, there's so much more that we're not going to have a pretty good clue as to what's happening. I know that President or Bashar al-Assad did put out a statement which felt very tight but also vague at the same time, and it was particularly interesting to watch that all happen, because it's just like this is a big part of just I remember when the war broke out, when I was in high school, when that was still the case, and everyone was talking about what was going on in Homs and Aleppo. And now all of a sudden, it's 10 plus years later, and you're all of a sudden realizing, no, the world is that part of that chapter of this Middle Eastern history has finally kind of come to a close. And now we're seeing a transitional government move in with, it's almost as if the, what are they calling themselves now? The HTS, or the Transitional Government for Syria. They have like the same sort of corporate Memphis, but it's all, very Sunni. Like we're very much open for diversity and liberalization of our markets for investment, but at the same time, it's time to wear the veil and do everything about it.
No Christians, yeah, exactly. So,
yeah, kill the Alawites. Seems to be an attitude that many of the Sunni rebels take to heart. Sorry, what were you going to say, Gio?
Well, I was gonna, if you wanted to, because I'm not that up to stuff in the Romanian situation, but if you wanted to start with Syria, there was a great interview that my friends at the War Report did. What's his name? But he recommended reading, with George McMillan. And he recommended reading the very early Alistair Crook articles in the Huffington Post. And there was one he wrote in 2013 about the sort of, the thesis, The Management of Savagery, right? Like I have the book, that's the title of the book actually by Blumenthal, right? Which I think is pretty good. I mean, he gets some things wrong, but, because he is like anti-imperialist leftist, whatever. But I
don't know the thesis. So maybe for my Prude and you apparently are both much more readers than I am these days. Yeah. So,
well, the Management of Savagery is basically the strategy by the Islamic State of creating like a condition of chaos through ultra-violence that transitions from one governmental period to the other, ideally the quote-unquote Islamic State. But in this article, I think it was from 2013 by Alistair Crook, he talks about how how ISIS at the time, al-Nusra, whatever you want to call them, that they viewed it as sort of like a setback akin to the setback that the Prophet Muhammad experienced in his overtaking of Mecca. And there's a lot of like themes there. But while I was reading it, I'm like, well, I guess they won, because like last week what happened? So in a way, it's like they truly do view it as like a fulfillment of prophecy that the Alawite and the Ba'athist factions in Syria, with the backing of Iran and Russia and so forth, that they are going to be getting rid of, and that they can truly go for their like what's that land called that they say when the new prophet will come, the Khorasan or whatever it's called. And so I think like he's writing this in 2013, but it's like with our own eyes, we're seeing it happen in real time. The overthrowing of Assad, and the death of Baathism, and subsequently the Sunni Islamization of Syria as a whole, not just those outer regions that have been. But it's very funny though, because I wonder if the sort of like ginning up of that prophetic form of ISIS brand Islam, that rejected Al Qaeda and so forth. That's like very easily can be very easily manipulated by Western intelligence agencies, by Mossad in particular, to fulfill their various geopolitical aims against Iran, because they consider Iran to be the sort of far enemy that is still within the Islamic world, but is quote unquote not exactly in their purview of the Islamic world. So I wonder if like the true like theocratic politics of Syria or the situation there, I wonder if that plays more of a role than any sort of like if the geopolitical manipulation is like somehow akin to what these rebels or quote unquote freedom fighters think of their own ideology. And I wonder if like that's the case of just order out of chaos. Like, these people hate Iran anyways. They hate they hate Assad anyways. So it's like, well, yeah. So what's been your take, Semiogogue, of like the happenings of the past few weeks?
Well, a number of things come to mind immediately with what you were saying. One is that the Turks have long used this idea of controlled chaos by sending what they call their başbozuks, their broken heads. That's the literal translation of başbozuk. Broken heads, crazy people, bandits, haydutlar, bandits of various kinds who get sent in as irregulars to sow terror in the populations in advance of more formalized, military movements. And indeed, with what we've seen in Syria, these rebels who were holed up in Idlib or the SNA or HTS or these different factions, they get pushed forward first. And there are no shortage of videos online if one wants to go look for them. I haven't in particular, but I've seen a few of people being beheaded or otherwise treated horribly, murdered and dismembered and these kinds of things. So that idea is sort of sending forth the irregulars first into territories that you want to take over, and that goes all the way back to the old Ottoman days, where they sent their Ghazis, warriors for the faith, ahead of them in order, in particularly in border areas, to kind of sow chaos and create opportunities in the rest, and then more formal military forces would follow behind them. And it does seem that we've seen that unfold there. As for how they're motivated ideologically or religiously, and how that fits with their different eschatological narratives or sectarian narratives, I am not enough of an expert on the flavors. For example, for me, distinguishing between ISIS and Al Qaeda, which three-letter agency, is one more State Department and one is more CIA or something? I don't really know. But presumably they would inject the necessary narrative elements to have a plausible story that the people operating could clutch to their bosom as justification for why they're either killing people or getting killed. I tend to think that it really is primarily power politics, and I tend to believe that the so-called rebels and different militias and the rest are basically mercenaries. Prude and I talked many times in the past about what's going on. It's been very clear to both of us that the so-called rebels have been shipped back and forth between Libya and Syria many times. I just heard from the person I was speaking to, one of whom is a woman who is based in Armenia, who follows geopolitics. She's watched what happened in Artsakh with the ethnic cleansing there by the Azeris, supported by the Israelis, to drive the Christians out. And she mentioned that many of these same mercenary forces have been shipped up there as well. So
Uyghurs and so forth as well from China. So yeah,
Uyghurs coming in, yes, in fairly large numbers. I think they're mercenaries getting paid, and getting paid fairly well by the compared to the type of take home pay that people in the Syrian Arab army under Assad were getting paid. They're getting enormous amounts of money are being poured into these things. And there's all kinds of room for, well, I want to say organized crime, but really my entire life I've tried to understand the difference between intelligence services and organized crime, and I can't distinguish any meaningful way in which the two things differ. But anyway, that by way of response to the things you brought up in terms of Syria, you know, one of the big things people are wondering about is whether or not Iran and Russia recognized a kind of fait accompli there, where what are you going to do? You know, everybody talks about how it's going to be divided up and it's not a real state anymore. Well, it hasn't been a real state for quite some time. It has, in fact, it's a de facto partition that's been there for quite some time. And, you know, Russia and Iran were in the unenviable position of having to try to keep it together to whatever extent it could be kept together. And there's a considerable cost in blood and treasure and, you know, bodies from, you know, your Hezbollah allies in Lebanon, you know, dropping. So it's at least a possibility. I'm not making the claim this is the case. It's just one of the possibilities is that Russia and Iran said, you know what, fuck this shit. We are not going to be able to hold this. Why don't we pull out? And as I put in a tweet on X, I said, you know, the truth about vacuums is that they suck. So if you create a vacuum in that region into which Israel and Turkey and, you know, further money in support of the Kurds from the U.S. is going to have to flow, then suddenly it's someone else's problem and they get to own it. And you entirely reverse the dynamic, because what you have is an attempt to maintain some sort of territorial integrity and government continuity in Syria on the part of the Iranians and the Syrians themselves and the Russians. And then everyone else gets to kind of have the best job ever, which is just to sit on the sidelines and fund any number of different organizations to try to bring that down. And you sort of have the basic difference between you know, what an attacker has to go through and what a defender has to go through. The defender has to be alert at all times. They have to remain alert across the domain of different places they could get hammered, whereas the attacker just gets to choose where and when and to apply the maximum amount of force to the weakest area. And so we've seen what could be an inversion there, where by pulling out, Iran and Russia, in fact, gain more ability to cause problems there. That's according to this hypothesis. I don't mean to suggest, you know, it's not a cope fest. Russia got a slap apparently on the world stage, you know, in terms of how things appear. Iran has no doubt suffered a setback, having had their corridor to Lebanon cut off. So I'm not saying that it's like a win situation. But that might be what happened. Like I've asked everybody, and if anybody knows, please, you know, send me a message or post it in a chat or whatever. But there's this whole business of the call that took place before this happened between Erdogan and Putin, and then right after that call, all this shit went down. And so I'm thinking to myself, what happened? Erdogan called and said, "Abicim bir şey demek istiyorum." I don't know. Did Putin just call and say, "Hey, I want to tell you we're about to go in"? And Putin was like, "Gosh, you know, Recep Tayyip, I really wish you wouldn't do. Well, I really wish you wouldn't do that." Or conceivably, could it have been where they had a call and Putin said, "Hey, Erdogan, there's a big opportunity for you here because we've decided that we can't handle this. And so we're going to be pulling out. So just a heads up, if there were to be an invasion, we're just going to fold and fold and fold again. And you guys can take it over." I don't know. But that do you think that Putin seem to be a possibility.
Do you think Putin gave Assad a quick out? Like he said, well, it's kind of over. So, you know, to the famous Richard Spencer clip, I think it's kind of over. Like I wonder if Putin like personally said to Assad, like, come to Moscow. Going to Iran would be more difficult, obviously, would be way less comfortable. So I wonder if Putin intervened to say, well, I mean, it's been over 10 years. I mean, and currently Russia's, you know, occupied with something else at the moment, to say the least. So I wonder if there was just because remember people were speculating that Assad died in that plane, that like mysterious plane. No doubt people died in that plane, obviously, but you know, there was like all your typical like Western cheerleaders and off-whites, strange contingents of even people in the far right that don't like Assad. They were all like gloating and cheering Assad is dead. But, I thought that didn't really pass the sniff test, so yeah.
I don't know what's going on there, to be honest with you. I heard my guests in the stream earlier today say they don't even really know for sure where Assad is. Russia has, of course, announced that he's there. Mm-hmm. That's the extent of my knowledge of it. I think it was the Armenian woman who was speaking with us earlier today who said, it may be that he went to Russia with his family under whatever that pretext was before this all broke out, and that he never did go back to Syria. So we don't even really know. Of course, what's being reported in the news, and I don't know that this is wrong either, so I'm not making any claims, but they say that, he went back, but then he left very quietly, and apparently left behind some family members, cousins, and the rest, some of whom have since been killed. I don't know. I really don't know. There's a lot of stories being told about how he was trying to turn his head towards the Gulf states and listening to their advice about how it probably made more sense for him to reach some sort of, modus vivendi or détente with Israel. And so in that fashion, maybe he could, move things forward. He had already gotten considerable acceptance from the Arab League. Again, his position was being rehabilitated. But the same people who say that, or many of the same people who say that, will then turn around and say, Israel said, hey, you've got to cut off Hezbollah, and Assad refused to do it. And so these seem a bit inconsistent to me. If he's really going full bore towards this thing of, supposedly leaks were happening under his watch that revealed where Iranian, Quds Force or IRCG people were located in Syria at the time, enabling Israel to come in and strike them. I don't know. It's all such a mess that I can't make any sense of it. I just, if you apply the cui bono approach, yes, there are immediate ways in which Iran is the biggest loser, and Russia gets something of a bloody nose, not a major one, not a broken nose, but maybe a bloody nose. But now we have to see whether or not they maintain those ports on the coast. Thus far, there's no clear indication that they will be pushed out. And in any case, as other people have observed, they've got the option of putting ports in Iran, for fuck's sake. So if they lost the Syrian ports, and if there is going to be some sort of defense pact signed officially between Iran and Russia that goes beyond what we've seen thus far with radar systems being sent in and the rest, and
drones and so forth,
so then we could see a situation where Russia could set up a base in Iran and they wouldn't even need the one in Syria to the same extent. But I tend to think they want that one because of what's going to unfold with East Mediterranean gas supplies. Prud and I have discussed that in the past. The Eastern Mediterranean basin has all sorts of energy supplies that could, if Russia is successful in Ukraine, take up some of the slack of the loss of Russian energy. They could also position themselves in Algeria, with whom they have a great relationship. I mean, a pretty good relationship. And they also have part of the territory, or in a coalition, they exercise some control over one of the factions in Libya. And there's also a base that they made arrangements for, on paper anyway, with the Sudanese government before the civil war went into some new convulsion and phase there. So there are other places for them to go. I don't know that they will want to turn over those bases, though, because there are things that are going to be going on with the Eastern Mediterranean gas. And if they lose that seat at the table, then it's a very straightforward proposition for Turkey to simply continue moving south along that coast and Israel to keep moving north. And then you're going to see Lebanon next up on the chopping block. And God. Lebanon has been screwed for decades. It's been hammered and hammered and hammered. So
at least 35 years, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, since the 70s, when it was considered the Paris of the East, and banking in Lebanon was all gorgeous before it all got shattered. by our greatest ally. Yeah.
No, but that's
And
interesting though about the bases, because initially Assad, back in the 2010s, he sort of resisted like full-on Russian base occupation because he wanted to appeal to the other Arab states, that they're very like hesitant of European colonial power. But I guess maybe that was like the wrong decision now. So I don't know. It's like, if Iran is like different, if Iran realizes that every other power in the region hates them, so it doesn't matter. Like if the Russians having a base there, it doesn't really matter then at the end. So you never know.
Well, it's also part of the game with Turkey and Russia, because I think Russia, Prude, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember right, Russia has dumped a good bit of money that needs to be paid back eventually by Turkey into helping Turkey develop nuclear power of its own. I think there's also quite a bit going on with Turkey as a natural gas hub for the region, carrying a considerable proportion of gas that could be gas, energy, oil, and natural gas that could be coming from Russia. In any case, Turkey's going to have to keep some sort of relationship with Russia in the Black Sea if things continue to go as they seem to be going, with Georgian Dream standing firm, not allowing themselves to be destabilized fully by the West. They're going to come back to some extent into Russia's orbit. Russia is going to have a good portion of the Ukrainian coastline, if not Odessa. That's still in Transnistria.
Yeah.
So Turkey's going to have to maintain some kind of relationship with them in any case. So it may be in Turkish interests to keep those bases in Tartus, Latakia, whatever, in order to have a counterbalance, as indeed it would be a counterbalance for HTS. But I'm not the only person suggesting that. That's not even a hot take, really.
Well, I think
because
the other
Russia
thing
would be the only game in town with the Black Sea. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's sort of the important thing to consider here is that it looks like the Russians are pulling out and that they're moving in that direction. We've seen videos of them evacuating. I mean, the loss of the port in Tartus is going to be the biggest thing to really consider out of all of this. Is like, okay, well now the warm water port that would allow them access to the Mediterranean and also to have sort of a counterbalance with Turkey, because since the war began in Ukraine, the Montreux Convention of 1936 has been invoked, which has allowed the Black Sea to more or less not escalate in the way that many were worried it would. And so Ankara has allowed to play itself as a pretty effective counterbalance. And now to see them already engage here, I mean, just earlier it was reported by Reuters that the United Nations Special Envoy, I think his name is like Geert Peterson. I don't think maybe he's American, I don't know. But he had said that, listen, this conflict is far from over because the proxies and the parties at play between the United States, Israel, and Turkey are all still there. And I mean, Turkey is still waging its war against any Kurdish fighters, which of course are supported by the United States. There's of course the leverage about religious minorities. I know that there has been some reports, I haven't been able to confirm them, with respects to the Druze wanting to do anything that they can with respects to, trying to find someone to care for them before they kind of get taken care of by this ongoing, Islamic majority or this transitional government or whatever's in power. And then on top of all that, like America is still trying to leverage its own support with both Israel, Lebanon, the Kurds fighters that are still there on their side. I think it's like the Syrian Democratic Forces or something like that.
Oh, the YPK?
Oh no, they're their own thing. There's the Kurdish, there's the Kurdish Workers' Party, then there's the
PKK, YPG, and SDF,
and the
SDF. That was what all those Arnie leftists love, the Chapo cells. They
were cheering on sort of these female-led forces. But I mean, this is on top of the fact that you have like the Syrian National Army, which is backed by Turkey, that has been battling like the Syrian Democratic Forces in the wake of al-Assad being not in the picture. And so all that's still going to happen. And this is a point in time where Turkey, who's been leveraging itself in a sort of this three-way battle for its own geopolitical interests in the Levant, on top of the fact that it did have, I'm sure that Russia's probably pulling that crap out from the deal from them with respects to like the S-300 missile system for defense. And then, leveraging, the millions of, Syrians that are in their own country where, Erdogan has said repeatedly in the past, it's like, I have a $2.5 million biomass of Syrian migrants. I can just like flood into Europe. And that's been his way to sort of levy against Europe, the United States, Israel, al-Assad's government, and now dealing with the Russians since the war in Ukraine had started. So, I mean, I don't think that, I think that Peter, for once, I'm agreeing with the UN spokesperson, but like, no, the war is far from over. The palace intrigue is going to be what happens on the battlefield and on the ground. The discussion about, moving closer towards Mount Herman and the, ceasefire agreements in the 70s, I think that we can kind of safely say that that's, kind of been thrown out the window. Netanyahu just said earlier today, according to the AP Newswire, that like they're going to stay in that demilitarized zone for the foreseeable future. And I don't think that there's any force in there that wants to go to war right now with Israel, or at least at the very moment, maybe not do it without the U.S. backing and support, which of course
Israel has taken a lot of W's this past month. So
and Trump's going to get into office, and we kind of know already that position is going to be far more pro Netanyahu, clean up the war and get that over with than anything else. So, I mean, with respects to all this, I think we're beginning to just watch a much greater conflict play out, and it's not going to be just arms and blood and treasure, but it's also going to be about pipeline deals. I know that a couple of years ago now, Oliver, you and I did a lengthy stream on just the pipeline politics of this entire region. Discussions over the East Med pipeline, which had been in this Israeli project that America had one time backed and the Biden administration had reneged on. We'll see if that comes out into the open again if we go status quo anti-Biden. So there's a lot that I think will play out that we'll just need to keep an eye on and keep a closer watch to, because sure, the truce has been extended with respects to how this war might play out. But I mean, at the very least, we know anytime that a strongman dictator of sorts comes into about, religious minorities are always going to be the first to suffer. The Druze, the Alawites, and the Syrian Christians, both, Chalcedonian and non-Chalcedonian Christians, they're all at risk. And these are the things that are going to play out here. And as we watch the news wires unfold, whether it's from Al Jazeera, Reuters, the Associated Press, all the rest, everyone's going to be fighting for the narrative as to why their guy should be in charge and who is in there. Right now, I think that Turkey has quite a bit of leverage in this situation between the United States and Israel, and they're going to try and get the most that they can. And if Russia loses that warm water port, the question is going to be what kind of concessions can they get from Turkey with respects to Odessa and the Black Sea. And I think that those will be the things that we need to pay attention to going forwards. But I try not to get any takes from Twitter, just in part because it's really hard with all those like open source intelligence accounts.
That's what your friend said. They're all a bunch of like clickbaiters.
Well, it's not just clickbait.
Half of them are glowies.
I mean, it's not just clickbait, but a lot of them just have an axe to grind because when your whole, I mean, again, I think this has a lot
of them like pro-regime, pro-Ukrainians, and
it's not just that, Gio. I mean, it's also the fact that like Twitter itself, because it's so monetized and gamified now, like you have to be in on the hustle and grind set sort of mentality about, no, this is the take, this is the analysis, this is the hottest new thing. It's almost like they've become the Institute for the Study of War, where like you're constantly putting out a new take every 15 minutes or a new map, because you have to do that in order for eyes to stay on you. And relevance be damned, because that's the thing about saying open source intelligence is that, well, your intel can be bad, no one can hamper you on it. If you offer a correction, that's good for you, but then at the same time, none of us are on the ground. We're not really going to know. We're going to find out through the second order consequences. And I think that when we follow these pipeline deals and we follow what the public statements are of these leaders are going to be, the second order consequences are really going to be the best way to gauge where the leverage might be or where the strengthened position is going to be with these respective governments.
No argument here. I agree with all of that, particularly as regards the what is it? Kipple? What did Philip K. Dick talked about, a kind of like post-technological refuse that accumulated and formed growing mounds that like never ended, and we'd all be buried beneath them. There's something about the X space or Twitter space that is, it's just like heaps of filth, like the play forts that the kids go to at McDonald's where they dive into the pit of
the ball pit.
It's a bioaccumulator.
Exactly. And the more time we spend on X, the more I feel like I'm at the bottom of the bioaccumulator, like I'm that one brave child that slithered to the bottom of the pile of little plastic balls, and I found like the condoms and syringes and things like that whole space is just,
you're inside that Chuck E. Cheese in the ghetto part of Houston, and you're just like, oh, mommy heroin, like this is a great time, and then you get stuck with it, and then your life changes forever.
Yeah,
That's
you have to
unfortunately
take
like the
medication
high of
forever.
social media these days is like once you get that like first viral tweet or something breaks the algorithm or breaks containment, you're like, oh, this is really good, and then it just sends you down this like terrible path. And it was funny because there was this like I think it was like a child rearing pamphlet picture from like the 1920s that was going viral, and it was like these steps of like depravity about like drinking and eating and what things make a bad boy, and one of them was just like Mexicanized dishes. And it was just like, see how far we've fallen in this respect. It's just, and the same thing with social media and all that jazz. I think it's interesting to watch from a marketing perspective, and I'm sure that you've got a lot on that, Oliver. I think it's interesting because we've all been around, and you especially, Oliver, because you and I've talked before. You've been here since before the like the Center for like the Data Society or the Center for Data and Information, the Google ads report about all the like alt-right accounts and things like that from the past and who's interacted with who, and that led to like the adpocalypses and things. It's a really different environment now from even just 5 years ago or even a few years ago. Like we had Jack Dorsey Twitter, Parag Agrawal Twitter, and now with Elon Musk, this has sort of become like a place where he very much wants this to be the everything app. And I thought that our friend Morgoth's Review has a really great, take on that when this all started a couple of years ago. Is that, sure, things might be, better, or the selection pressure for takes and whatnot is not going to be there. But just like with YouTube, just like with other social media platforms, it's going to be a lot harder to come back if you're banned this time. Especially now that there's money on the line. And now that there's money on the line, like if you're not curating or muting certain words or phrases or emojis, that place is turned in very quickly into like BuzzFeed, where it's like all these top 10 articles and it's Chat GPT basically
all run by
writing.
Indians, by the way.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
right? And Catherine and I were talking about that a while ago. Like the Western moment of the internet, the Western American internet has kind of died as it's become more globalized. And so now you've got Chat GPT being like, explain Oswald Spengler to me in like 20 easy points, and then you just post that into a thread, and then you talk about how like the inevitable rise of Caesars, and I was just like, I know you didn't read him. I know that you didn't read the chapter on math because that's probably one of the more important chapters in Decline of the West. But here we are, and it's gotten frustrating because it's unless you're curating very carefully, which I try to do. The For You tab on Twitter is just
For you conservatism.
Yeah, it's just slop.
Shout out to Earth Rabbit.
It's so bad.
No, but it's funny. It's like I saw Q the Storm today say smash your phones. So everyone smash your phone. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, that's a great account. I love Q the Storm. Smash your phones. Do you see this? And it's like a picture of the sky. That's great. But anyways, yeah, but to get back to it though, a year ago, a lot of people were skeptical of the notion that Russia could sufficiently advance enough militarily to take Odessa. I mean, Odessa would be their ideal goal in terms of ending the war. But a lot of people would say that it would take a strategic collapse of the Ukrainian military to do that. Now, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, I don't know. I still believe that it probably would take like a 1 million-man army to actually take a city like Odessa. But if the Ukrainian army is going to collapse or on the verge of some sort of big shift in leadership, then who knows? I mean, you could end up with a situation of Russia controlling the majority of the Black Sea. So, I think, yeah, so that's obviously incentivizing Turkey to play ball. I don't know what's going to happen. I personally think that Trump will probably, the Trump administration will definitely seek to force the parties into negotiation. And I think Putin is enough of a bureaucrat to essentially just take a deal of like, okay, you get to keep these 4 regions. You get to keep Crimea, obviously, and be done with it. I mean, that would be a huge smack in the face to a lot of people in the Russian public. It would be a smack in the face to Russian nationalists that would want to take a place like Odessa, or even like, some kind of like Strelkov fantasy of taking Kiev. But like, I think that Putin is incredible. At the end of the day, he's a pragmatic lawyer type. He's kind of nebbish in that regard. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think the war will end right away. I don't think like JD Vance is enough of a vatnik to be like, okay, Zelensky, it's over for you. I think the war will last for another year. But when it comes to all the politics in the Middle Eastern region, I mean, that's another, who knows what's going to happen. What would happen if Iran becomes, systemically isolated from those other powers in the region as well, even more than they have been isolated. So yeah, it's all up in the air. And also, I guess we could talk about the domestic politics in terms of what's going to happen to the Democrats after Trump, but that's another thing. And I think we have some Canadian news as well. So that's interesting, but
well, I mean, it
yeah, I know.
Well, Canada being in the news, I mean, finally, but also at the same time, yeah, the war will go on for at least another year. And a lot of conversations I've had, this is just coming from my niche part of working in government, is that a lot of people are saying, well, maybe wait till the first quarter of 2026 for us to have a pretty good idea of where things are going.
Oh, yeah,
because you have Trump getting inaugurated, you have the first 100 days, and then there's so many foreign policy balls to juggle that we don't know how that's going to affect trade, shipping, consumer confidence. I mean, like right now, just because we're in that lame duck period, that everyone feels like, okay, things are in a good position. And that things are like, we have a reason to invest, we have a reason to get excited. We saw that in the wake of the election. All these people are like, we get to have kids, we get to afford things again. This is nice. While all these like lefties on Twitter are just like seething. It's just like, I can't believe the American people chose fascism instead of dealing with just slightly higher prices of eggs. And it's like, yeah, baby, that's what I'm here for. Like, if that's our definition of what makes someone a fascist, so be it. I'll choose those cheap eggs any day of the week. But like at the same time, it's really fun to watch all this play out because some of the mainstream press are having this like weird come to Jesus moment where they're like, oh, maybe I'm part of the problem. And they're like, no, it's not. It's those awful white people that are the problem. Because like Stephanie Rule, I think she's with MSNBC. Like she had this interview a while ago and it was making the rounds today on Twitter where it was, she's like, it would take 50 people to get a hold of Kamala Harris and Biden or anyone in the White House. Whereas I could call Trump's actual phone number and ask for an interview. And she was like, it was easier for me to call Trump, have Trump tell me to go fuck myself than it was to get a hold of anybody there. And at the same time, like there's this great, I hate all the sort of like, I think the post-election high has kind of come down. Yeah. And I think that allows some room for some sobriety at least. But like the real crystallization has been the left successfully sequestering themselves away from any right-wing position or understanding of how the right works. Now, this has already been a long established point. I mean, Jonathan Haidt's talked about it.
On Blue
and the
Sky,
rest.
you mean?
Well, I mean, just not even the Blue Sky or the Mastodon or Blue Sky Twitter exodus, but I just mean in general, there is no contact really with these outside worlds. I mean, there are some like liberals that I can have polite conversation with, but they're all Gen X. They're all my parents' age and older. And with that being said, like that's when I can still have kind of a discussion. Anyone my age or younger, there's no point in dialoguing whatsoever because we live in two entirely different realities, two axiomatic presuppositions that are totally different, two epistemic frameworks that are totally completely opposite of one another. And in doing so, you're watching these sort of society, these little bubbles. We talk about like right-wing Twitter being sort of like the crab bucket or the shark wombing, but everything is the same way there. And I really wish I remember who had that take where it's just like, listen, if you're on the left, you can have different opinions on class and economics.
That was
you have to bow down.
That was Jen's
there you go.
Poster, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you have to bow down to like trans rights, Black Lives Matter, gay rights, and accept that. Otherwise, you're not on the left. And when you're sequestered in these little environments, and we're already seeing this in plenty of places. I mean, I think today the best example of that was the announcement of of the new Civilization games, which have not been good since Civ 5. And there are plenty of other macroeconomic micromanagement games and 4X games out there. I can give you a great big list if you want. But, to watch them announce like, oh, one of the American leaders that you can play as is fucking Harriet Tubman. And it's just like, nobody asked for this. And we already saw that at the Game Awards. Like
Harriet Tubman, dictator of the world.
Yeah, like the great, black gynocracy that can be led and the cultural victory of the United States, which is downright terrifying. But like that's sort of the message. You have the naughty dog doing its usual bit, making fun of like the church bad, and here's our like tranny or whatever. And so it's just like, okay, clearly the culture has sequestered. Like this sort of great divide that everyone likes to talk about is still there. And our friend Dave Green, the distributist, had said it great. Like leftism hasn't been defeated. There has been no destruction. There has been no major rightward shift, except in a few areas like Daniel Penny or Derek Chauvin getting his opportunity to prove his case and and an appeal to
they're
test.
allowing evidence of St. Floyd's chest records, I think.
Yes, they're to get a heart tissue sample.
But it doesn't matter because George Droid has a exoskeleton now, so it doesn't really matter.
So, I mean, so these big cultural, battles, I think the lines are still being drawn. And clearly, I mean, when you see all these advertisements, you see all this posting, you're like, oh, actually, no, the world as we know it is still very much the same sort of, woke garbage and nonsense that were there. Like when when things like Obergefell or some form of disparate impact gets overturned, then I know that there's a real vibe shift going on. But right now, that's all that this is sort of this high, that comes with the electioneering intercourse that we all engage in. And now I hope in this moment, we're kind of in this post-election clarity, and we're all kind of experiencing le petit mort of just like, oh no, things are still bad. Things are still going off the rails.
Thing people were going nuts over. What's this Neil Druckmann thing about?
So Neil Druckmann, the guy, I think he's the head at Naughty Dog, or he's one of the writers behind The Last of Us Part 2 in the first game. And I think he had basically instead, he's the one responsible because they announced this big, new Naughty Dog open RPG type deal. I think it's called like the Heretic Prophet or whatever. And it's just like, here is this, like, I guess a true main character plot line where it's taking on an organized religion for differing views. And it's just like, no one gives a shit because we already know what you did the last time.
There's going to be HRT in the zombie apocalypse, so I could sustain that character.
Well, and it's so funny how these like sort of lefty projects work is that, like it's the post-apocalypse or it's this like big open space world, but like there's still going to be readily available chems or whatever. Like I said this on Frody Midjord's Decameron Film Festival this year. I said, I think it's really funny in this like post-apocalypse, post-economic collapse America that our main character in The Prayer of the Roller Boys, who has to take a machine gun and drive an armored truck to deliver pizzas in Los Angeles, his biggest dream is to go to college. And it's like, dude, you have to kill people to live. Like, I don't think going to a fucking Ivy League is the least of your worries right now. You're lucky if you survive the next day. But that's sort of just the narrative sense of, disbelief. But I've been rambling on too long. I mean, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills sometimes when I'm on the internet. Like, I get it. We want to be optimistic. But at the same time, I'm asking for like a snippet of realism. And I feel like that's not too much to ask for.
Yeah. And there's only so much, you can get from Mearsheimer, in terms of supposed realism, and it certainly doesn't apply to the culture wars and social media and the rest. Well, I want to ask you guys along these lines a question, since you follow transformations in culture more closely than I do, and also I'm just fucking old. Like I'm moving into the phase where my future is going to be nothing but like dad jokes and like enlarged prostate advertisements. But
heated
there
blankets.
is heated blankets. Wait a minute now. I have an electric heater that I use in the winter time. I had to warm your bed up before you get in it. Anyway, all right. So I am wondering about the angle of public health. I am wondering about the RFK angle. I am wondering about the crossover value of somebody like RFK Jr. coming in, and the idea of being able to shake things up as regards public health, pharmaceuticals, public health regimes, everything from Canadian healthcare innovations to vaccinations and all of the rest. I don't have much of a connection with the left or normies or the mainstream, and I certainly wouldn't impugn either of you by suggesting that you do yourselves. But I think you both pay attention to some of what's going on in the discourse over on that side more than I do. And I mean, Gio, simply as a byproduct of living in Canada, you've got to hear more about what's going on in that world and what people's attitudes are. So like, I wonder to myself, I'm not framing this very well. I wonder what the opportunities are, I talk about what's been framed as MAHA, right? Make America Healthy Again. And I'm not entirely sure it's coincidence that's also like the Vedic and Hindu thing of like, Mahatma Gandhi,
Yeah, there could be
the
something.
Maha, the great whatever, right? Like there's sort of a granola crunchy kind of prayer wheel vibe of Maha. There's sort of a number of leftist coded opportunities in tackling people's concerns about the healthcare state, healthcare regimes, and the rest. When I think about what might happen in the future and where the opportunities are that maybe we're not tracking closely enough, and I could be wrong, but what do you think's going on with Kennedy and public health and vaccine stuff and all the rest? All I've seen is that Trump continues to try to toe this line of it's the greatest thing we ever did. It was the most successful, mobilization of all the medical industries and all the rest. And, and even if it was a little bit problematic, I didn't make it a mandate. I left it up to the states.
Yeah, the Agambian state of exception politics that was under Biden, not Trump. So, Trump. I think at the time he had to act, but well, I have a longer take actually about this. So, Prude, if you wanted to go first, and then.
Sure. I feel like the health stuff is one of the last, I don't want to say bipartisan, but it's like one of the cross-partisan issues.
Safe issue, yeah.
Yeah, where like I can have agreement with a lefty, like this is the one part where we can look at each other and be like, oh, we can all agree that like Purdue farm, like and the Sackler family is evil. Like we can all agree with that, and it was one of those rare moments where I was reading, this was about a year and a half ago. I reviewed Sohrab Ahmari, who I find to be just odious. His book Tyranny Inc. Like he spent a long time talking about like Sackler and Purdue Pharmaceuticals. And there was a lot in that I actually agreed with, and there was a lot of stuff that I disagreed with in his like overall thesis because it's very crypto Marxist. But like, that stuff is very much like we can all kind of agree on that, like, oh, our industrial grade farming and agriculture has its issues, and that there's going to be some overlap with people that are not what we would call traditional right wingers. Like we saw that very blatantly. You and I, Gio, especially when the whole Rizoma School thing had that piece in the American mind, and then everyone lost their shit when they're like, "This woman's a complete liberal." Like, she was like BLM, pro Bernie, but she was talking about regenerative agriculture and why that's an important deal. And just a couple of days ago, New York Magazine had put out their whole big piece on what is Make America Healthy Again. And I think that, there's that whole cross-partisanship is really important. I think I can just share this on screen so we can read the article.
What is that article? What did they outline, Prude?
Oh, it's a lengthy doozy of a piece. But, where did it start here? There's just one part here where it's like, while the pandemic attitudes split not only along partisan lines, but also according how much one trusted experts like Anthony Fauci. Masks and vaccination status became became unlikely political signifiers, putting various nonconformants against the more compliant Pfizer Democrats or the professional classes. City dwellers, theoretically invested in diverse mingling, adopted isolated regimens and worked from home. And on the left, the pursuit of safety came to look like a belief system in its own right, stoked by a habit of policing errant behavior.
Well, I was going to mention that, actually. That's a great point. But
Maha, with its disdain for authority and received wisdom, would come to look like the opposite of that. Honestly, when you see some of those like zero COVID people or the certain types that still mask, like
they still exist. They're like,
yeah. Oh, I know. Like I went to
the Japanese division out in Saipan.
To tell on myself a little bit, I went to a Trader Joe's last weekend, and there were and I drove quite a ways for it just because I was asked to go get something for a friend. And so I went there, and there were people who were very much like masked and stuff like that. And I was just like, whoa, like, like the war is over. But at the same time, like,
now they're ginning up things about bird flu now. That's like, they're going to be like that one. Who's that one guy with glasses? He's such a fucking piece of shit. The guy,
you know how little that narrows it down.
No, he's like got the goatee with glasses. He's like
that guy with glasses,
health expert.
Oh, the Dr. Peter Hotez or whatever.
Yeah, that guy. Like he's like saying like under Trump especially, there's going to be H5N1.
Yeah, it sounds like a threat, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like a threat. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead, Prude. Yeah.
So yeah, to me, there is this cross-partisan, like, everyone can kind of agree that we're not healthy. And I mean, if anyone, and I mean, Oliver and I especially, I mean, you too, Gio, because you don't live in the United States, and so your regulations for health and food is totally different. But I mean, if you live overseas,
That's
you know
one thing
that
I actually do like about Canada is we do have stricter regulation in terms of like additives. But that's
food is
about
way
it.
healthier overseas. You know, like I definitely ate. I mean, like my diet has changed a lot since
more
my
like
transplant and stuff.
Europeans,
But I mean, like even when I lived overseas, like I knew what even this crap I was eating, like was way healthier than the stuff that we have here. And it's insane to consider that that shouldn't be a partisan issue. And so it's really weird in an age where like all of our media ecosystems are different, all of our understandings of the world are totally predicated on like right wing or left wing or these like camped fandom basic assumption group positions. But this is the one area where there's any sort of public consensus that actually this is the area in which we can agree that something needs to be done for the good of the country. And that's very strange in this kind of hyper partisan moment where the good of the country, the public good, the national health, the body politic is being addressed in this issue. Because it's like, RFK Jr. on the campaign trail said some egregious shit about the border and abortion and stuff that I would totally not vote on. But on issues about like, dealing with, health, chronic disease, how much prescription drugs that Americans are on are all incredibly accurate. And it's really funny here on this instance, Maha's skepticism of the modern era with all its technological and chemical disruption spans the political spectrum. There's this strange campy ecosystem of right-wing bodybuilders and neo-agrarian online personalities like raw egg nationalists who are concerned as much with ecological depredation as with declining fertility, issues that are seen linked by the proliferation of microplastics or endocrine disrupting chemicals known as environmental estrogens, concerns shared by epidemiologists, reproductive rights advocates, and mommy bloggers. Even setting aside the presumed political motives of Luigi Macchione, the alleged murderer of the United Healthcare CEO, some of his online writings suggest a Maha-like anxiety about the forces of contemporary life that are messing with our biological rhythms and impeding on natural human interaction in the areas of sex and physical fitness. Evolutionary mismatch of Homo sapiens and its 21st century living environment is unfathomably immense, he wrote. Then, of course, there's references to Kaczynski, which, of course, is definitely going to be there.
There was that great letter from the 19th century, Darwin Among the Machines. You ever read that one, Prude?
No, I haven't. Who's it by?
It was by some Australian writer, but then a physicist or something or a biologist wrote a book in the 90s about, a computer physicist wrote a book in the 90s about it, about accelerative technology having a sort of Darwinian framework.
George Dyson,
yes.
Okay.
But the original author had very much like a proto-Kaczynskiite, they're not going to be humans. We have to destroy them. It's going to totally Semiogogue was mentioning, I believe was from Valis, if I recall, that work by Philip K. Dick about machines having, or sort of information technology asserting its own biomass in physical meat space. Was it Valis or was it another book by Philip K. Dick? I forget. I think it was Valis. But
no, I'm just double checking because at least somebody got my Kipple reference. So fuck if I know. I'm going to look while you're going.
Yeah, you could look it up. But I have a hot take on this. I think that sorry, Purdue, go ahead if you're.
No, go ahead. I'm ordering a copy of Darwin Among the Machines right now off Thrift.
Yeah, I mean we can review it. Yeah. But the thing is, from my perspective, I think that the left has sort of went through a shift that was almost naturally going to occur, which is that they were, and this was part and parcel with their beliefs in general, is that it's actually funny because a very prominent, I shouldn't say, very prominent anime poster, let's just put it that way, me and him were having this exchange about the nature of leftism, and he said something very interesting about how it's at the one end skeptical of technology, or rather skeptical of the Promethean implications of technology, but also on the other end, very anti-mystical. And the reason I bring this up is because the left has gone through a transformation from, I would say, maybe the mid-80s to probably mid-90s till the 2000s, where they sort of sloughed off any form of crunchy granola or New Ageism that was very popular in the 80s and to the extent in the early 90s. So you still have some remnants in Silicon Valley. You still have people that were syndicalists, but they went to Eastland Institute, and like who knows a lot of the glow in the dark, the stuff that happened there. And you have like a lot of tech people that were involved, but you have this progressive sort of like this progressive atheism that was creeping into the political left. And by the time you get to GWAT, and by the time you get to the sort of like dying gasps of the conservative, moral majority, the left becomes fully atheistic. And so now you have the left being the one saying, well, actually, big agri is supported by the science, certain gene therapy is supported by science, and all of this sort of like attitude towards holistic living, that's like not progressive enough. And now you have this shift to where the right wing, and I do like, listen, I'm skeptical of right wingers that only focus on the lifestyle politics, because as Catherine D said many moons ago, you're going to get like the raw egg cookbook in Walmart, and so I think that it's an easy issue for a lot of right wingers. I mean, it's a vital issue. It's important, public health. But whether or not RFK Jr. can create a national program of, for example, fitness in schools, or better, an actual like better lunch menu, not the Michelle Obama, prison food lunch menu. But like if he can create some kind of public awareness towards big pharma, I think it would be good. But ultimately, I don't see it going away. Like I don't see it going that far, because the pharmaceutical companies are some of the most powerful and biggest lobby groups in all of the Western world, are basically just pharmaceutical companies and big agri companies and so forth. But I do think that there is this pervasive culture war shift towards these things like that you would classify as very hippie, very agrarian. Now that's being taken up by the political right. And so, yeah, you do have this crossover. But I do think that maybe people are overstating it too much, and it's easier to focus on lifestyle politics than a lot of other contentious issues. And I don't think that the big agri or big pharma is going to go away anytime soon. They're going to still survive kicking and screaming. It would be nice if Trump were to have like a sort of like sort of like a McCarthyite style, panel for un-American activities, but only now against big pharma and big media and big agri. But I don't really see that being realistic, because the political left and their lobby groups, they're slowly but surely adopting a very pro-regime stance when it comes to public health. Notice that they hate, healthcare CEOs. They want universal healthcare, but they want like the Canadian style MAID program version of public healthcare. So it's not, and they won't say it explicitly, but as we've seen, for example, this ruling in the UK under the Keir Starmer regime, going the way towards a Canadianification of healthcare. I think if Kamala were to have won, you would have had an acceleration of that. You would have had a public option beyond Medicaid and beyond Obamacare, and you also would probably have a national, let's call it a passive form of MAID, if you will, if Kamala were to have gone, if she were to have moved the needle towards, Joe Biden numbers. And on this show, for YouTube purposes, we totally believe the official story of the 2020 election. But you do see this culture war shift. And so I don't know how effective Make America Healthy Again will be. It is a step in the right direction, because there's so many issues when it comes to national security, the economy, just basic ability of the population to do anything. Public health is a huge thing. And, maybe the predictions are true that for Gen Xers, millennials, and Zoomers, their life expectancy might experience a dip compared to the boomers. I mean, when I was in high school, people talked about that. So, I think but then again, you have to be very cautious of overplaying the sort of vitalism and the public and the sort of pro health stuff, because it's, bodybuilding is good. I'm not so sure about the raw milk thing, but eating healthy is good. Bodybuilding's good. And if you could encourage the populace to adopt healthier lifestyles, that's ultimately good. But I think when it comes to a technocratic solution, it's something I think James Kirkpatrick said, that, instead of demanding that people do the hard and virtuous route, technology will just come and do it anyways on the cheap. So instead of people lifting weights, eating healthier, not consuming seed oils. You're just going to give everybody like state prescribed Ozempic. And so James Crouch is like, there you go. That's what it's going to be. And any like negative consequences to Ozempic, it's like, that will be like skirted under the table. So I'm, to say the least, I'm skeptical of RFK Jr., his efficacy, but I think it's a step in the right direction. But the culture war has reflected this discourse. Yeah, well, go ahead, Semiogogue, what were you going to say?
Yeah, his efficacy and his uptake, to take both of these medical terms and apply them to our discussion are very much in question. Well, the main reason I bring it up is because I look for opportunities. Metaphorically speaking, my late friend Tim used to say, you have to lay out the map. You have to look at the plan of the structure and map the plan of the structure in meticulous detail, because only then you will know where to place the charges. I remember once I asked him what was more important in violent interactions. Is it strength or speed? And he said accuracy.
Yeah, pretty much.
So when I look at Maha, when I look at RFK, and this is not to suggest that this will happen, but I see an enormous opportunity. And if I may lay this out, the first is something that I've brought up many times, which is fundamentally that if you sucked the guts out of the mystical, if you kicked over the vertical axis between heaven and earth, right, the ladder that Jacob's angels go up and down, right, and you resolved upon a materialist discourse as being the only one that was acceptable, then what you would see is the priests become managers of our physical body and of our property. And indeed, we see that, doctor used to be one learned in the law of the church, but now a doctor is someone who's received academic credentials, in particular now associated with attending to the affairs of the body. And we have, as a result, this focus, this priesthood, whether they be the lawyers who speak shitty little remnant gobbets of dog Latin like a priest, right? Or the physicians, they'll be like, well, your sacrum seems to have suffered a fracture, the doctors in their white coats rather than black outfits with a little white priestly collar, right? They have their professional attire, professional being related to confessional, to profess, to
yeah, it's all pastoral power. Yeah.
Right. And that being the idea of white collar professions as opposed to blue collar, right? We have this weird flattened materialist remnant of a priesthood, and that priesthood is fucking us. Whether it be lawyers, increasingly, I think you're going to be hearing jokes about doctors, much along the lines of what we've enjoyed for quite some time regarding doctors. And so you have this flattened materialist class that's supposed to attend to what's important for us. And they're, as I said, screwing us, that 100%. Weird intrusion that's happening behind me is going into my ass, and why is that happening? On the other hand, because of the technological advancements, the scientific advancements, we're still here talking to Prude. There are all kinds of things that they make possible that were not possible before. So there's this weird tension between the possibility, the potential inherent in these things, and the way in which the horrors of greed and, nepotism and all these other things have perverted that potential course. And so I look back at how historically we have become so upset with our priests, whether we're talking about
Protestant Reformation
right, or even older elements like iconoclasm and reactions to that. There's a deep-seated
Buddhism, relation to Hinduism. Yeah.
They go after it and they say, hey, now wait a minute. And so I see potential there, coming back to the point of lay out the plan of the structure and see where its weak points are. And that's why it's very, very interesting to me that Trump would put Kennedy into place. Maybe he's just throwing him a bone. Maybe it's going to be some sort of ceremonial position. Trump himself doesn't seem to be backing off from rhetorically claiming that, his moves to contain the pandemic were the best things since sliced bread. But I do see a major opportunity there, and one that leftists would get in with. I mean, there's a reason that Kennedy had a following at all. what's the other one? ICANN, the Informed Consent Action Network, continues to develop. There's also what's his name? Syrian Gilmstead. There's a lawyer whose firm is primarily involved with trying to get vaccine waivers and also to prosecute or move in and seek recompense for vaccine injuries. And I watched one of the videos with the Siri guy, Aaron Siri. I'll leave you to guess what his ethnic background is, talking about how he's going after these things. And before he spoke, RFK Jr. was there to introduce him, but then RFK had to run. There was somewhere he had to be, but he did stay to introduce him and waved at him as he left. So there are some weird connections there with the potential to activate against this, but against that on the other side, and I'll shut up now. We do have the points you raised. There's so much power. People have to understand how important it is. Certainly you do, Gio. I'm sure Prude does too. I just have to remind myself, no matter what the map is, no matter what the weak points are, when you're up against something with that much money, they could kill you with money. They could turn on a money hose that would just like abrade your skin until there was nothing left but like grape jam. Like there's so much money, they can destroy everything that stands in their way. Nevertheless, there's an interesting opportunity there.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Semiogogue, I mean, you're a Gen Xer, so you probably remember this. When it comes specifically to the certain medical procedure intravenously for, YouTube, back in the day, that was like pretty far. What'd you say, Prude?
You mean this? What's on screen?
Yeah. That was like a pretty far left thing. In fact, if you remember in Spin magazine, the ultimate Gen Xer alt anti-globalization leftist magazine, they had a feature about Fauci and AZT during the AIDS crisis. And I believe the original Solid Forum thread actually resurrected that article from Spin magazine. So they were incredibly skeptical of Fauci. But then it's like it only took like, I think 20 years from like Fauci being like a demon that killed gay people to now being like, having a documentary produced by Disney on him. So it's very funny how like things like it used to be like a far left, like total like nut job. You had a zine in college type of deal to be against, you knew the truth about Fauci. But now it's like, Fauci became the public hero. And I think there still is a number of people that are very invested who gained a number of not just power, not just money in terms of various positions, but the thing that's more important than power and money to these types, because they're like this sort of nebbish functionaries, is a lot of the media attention and clout that a lot of these Covidian era quote unquote doctors, a lot of them weren't even actually real MDs, by the way. A lot of these public health experts and doctors,
Dr. Jill Biden.
Yeah, Dr. Jill, Fingal Ding, you name it, right? A lot of those people, they're very desperate to shift gears to something else because that was the only time that they sort of like tasted, the ambrosia of like public attention and people hanging off their every word. So I think there's a huge body of people that have wanted like 2020, 2021 to like live forever. And so those people aren't certainly going away. And I don't know when it comes to medical funding. And also, you mentioned Canadian healthcare. Did you guys see the statistics for MAID recently in terms of the demographic breakdown?
That it's like 90+% white. Yeah.
90+% white. Yes.
Well, they got a lot of boomers that are coming up to be turned into Soylent Green. And
exactly.
If they want to cut the costs and make sure that they can move through that as quickly as possible, they need to be processed into some sort of, sustainable material as quickly as possible.
Yeah, maybe we could turn them into motor oil or something. I don't know.
Something like that. Well, and I mean, this is the other thing too. And this is just the COVID era destroyed public trust, period.
Yeah.
The politicization of lockdowns, the 2020 riots, the rampant anarcho-tyranny, the abundant pressure and mandate, to take something that had been, for all intents and purposes, rushed and was making millions of dollars. And in fact, the release of the Operation Warp Speed, the earliest vaccines were waited until after the election as to not impact Trump's chances of re-election in 2020. So the complete destruction of the entire medical industry for public trust being just completely on a partisan level has just destroyed any semblance of what America would be willing to do in response to the next pandemic, the next actual thing. And so overall, what do we have in retrospect? Well, we know in retrospect that this affected the immunocompromised and the elderly the most. We engaged in policies that had disproportionately affected those people, like with New York and ventilators and the financial incentives behind that to kill people and to harm them. And then on top of that, everything else had to be turned upside down. And I mean, again, it's funny that, just a few years ago, we were joking with death panels with Sarah Palin. But I mean, if you lived in certain parts of the country, in Minneapolis, in New York, and in Dallas County, Texas, where I got my transplant in 2021, if you were to receive monoclonal antibody treatment, that experimental, treatment that was labeled as experimental, that way they could pull it back and harm states like Florida later on during the Biden administration. Unless you had a pre-existing condition, if you were white, you were not treated equally with everybody else. It's the only reason why I got it when I got COVID in 2021 was because I had a pre-existing condition as being a transplant patient. I got it. If not, I was not going to be very high on the list as a white guy in Dallas County to receive that treatment. And so it's really difficult because, yes, as Oliver had pointed out quite well, I am alive due to the advances in medical technology and everything like that. And I'm very happy, and I thank God for it and the physicians that have kept me alive. But I also know that it was awkward for me because, especially for the first 6 months of the transplant, it was overwhelming pressure for me to get the jab. And I had said no. I had my reservations for it. I still have never taken anything with respects to the COOF in terms of an inoculation. Very happy with that because I just don't know what the long-term consequences of that are. I do know the long-term consequences of the drugs that I'm taking to stay alive, whether that be hair loss, weight gain, osteoporosis, etc. I'll take all that if it means I get to live a little bit longer because I have a lot to repent for. But, it's hard to maintain that balance of where has the established science gone and where are things going? Because we know that there are things like the replication crisis. We know that there are financial incentives for things to do so. And it throws everyone, and if you have a genuine conversation with someone, you throw sort of the politics aside and you focus on these issues. This is still one of the last few areas in which America has some broad degree of consensus on that, no, there's way too much money in healthcare. We spend the most per patient in the world, yet we're not really any healthier. And, I was just scrolling up here about ultra processed foods.
Yeah, Mangione said that, by the way.
Well, and I don't agree with him on fucking anything, apparently, except that issue, right? And so,
well, he was a Peter Thielite tech bro guy, so.
Yeah, but at the same time, he was also very much a seething lefty that looks like a middle or an Eastern European Balkan-esque. I know he's Italian, but he looks like someone who would have shot Archipelago.
He probably was the Albanian undercurrent of Sicilians. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an Albanian side of Calabria.
He looks like someone who would have been in the Black Hand in the 1910s.
And also, look at those fucking eyebrows too.
Yeah, that. What kind of Italian is that, Gio? Clearly a Southern one. But ultra processed foods compose over half the U.S. food supply and are made up primarily of chemically modified food and additives. They've been associated with obesity, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, depression, nutrition expert. See, and again, it's that word experts. We have this inherent, and I think it also has a lot to do with the American Protestant culture. It doesn't matter what you believe in. I'm an Eastern Orthodox convert. You're cradle Catholic, Gio. You are something, but you are God-fearing, Oliver, is how you've described it to me. But at the same time,
by the way, on my mother's side, that's Calabrian. They come from the Greekoid side of Calabria, not the Albanian side.
Well, so an important distinction.
My mother has a Greek.
Sure they do, Gio.
Sure they do. My mother has
look
a Greek
at you wearing a fucking
fez.
Yeah, look at you wearing the fez. But no, my point being though is that in America there is still that deeply ingrained skepticism of magisterium.
Yeah,
and even now with the religiosity, and you can read, especially Medical Nemesis, The Expropriation of Health by Ivan Illich. Highly recommend reading that book. It's really one worth covering and reading. just in part because as you guys were talking about earlier, like the pastoral has been replaced by the white collar clerical, like the doc collar has been replaced for the white coat. And in doing so, we have this like intense skepticism of it because, again, the public trust has been eroded. Public trust in media and all institutions is at an all-time low across partisanly. Only the high levels of trust exist among Democrats because you trust the people that give you power. And so all those things that play out the way that they do, you're very much left to question a very important point, which is, okay, if this is the way things are going to go, is there any chance that we can make any meaningful reform? My gut tells me no. And partially because you might get some symbolic victories that will be like pressure release valves. But I don't know how much damage that these guys can do, and especially with RFK Jr. Even if he does go in, I know that he met with senators today, and so did Tulsi Gabbard. It was really funny to see Tulsi take a picture with Rand Paul, because Rand Paul's like 5'8", and he, is getting hype mogged by Tulsi in heels. And I was like, oh, this is why he'll never be president. But at the same time, right, like there's hope that maybe he does get confirmed. That would be really interesting. But there's no guarantee of that. I mean, unless they do recess appointments, and even then that seems iffy right now. But I think it's very safe to say that when you look at all of these issues, that, mindful consumption, the things that we put in our bodies, these are things that any point in time in the past would have been common sense issues to agree with. I don't think anyone out there, unless they're getting paid, is going to stand up and say, I am going to be Roundup's biggest defender. I am going to be Tyson Foods' biggest defender. I hail, like the Sackler family and all that stuff.
There's people that definitely do that.
Well, yeah, and they deserve to not be heard. But I mean, it just illustrates the point being that in this day and age, these are the last common sense sort of things that we agree with, because we are unhealthy. We're one of the fattest developed countries on earth. And with all that being said, like, why are we talking about, euthanasia and things like that when we're spending billions of dollars to keep people alive? Like, diabetes is such a problem in this country that we spend billions of dollars a year through Health and Human Services and the Social Security Administration to subsidize dialysis care. And not just again, I didn't pay a dime when I was on dialysis, in part because I was insured, but also because any other extra expenses were covered by the taxpayer. And I'm very thankful for that. But I also know that I was the youngest person in there. Virtually everyone else in there was either due to extreme old age and organ failure, or was primarily due to diabetes. And they were monstrously overweight. And like, again, we would reduce health costs and we reduce this kind of spending on entitlements and things like that if we did the bare basic minimum to reform some things to actually do it. And that goes back to the same question that we talk about in politics all the time in these spaces, is what can you actually reform in a system that is so rigged against you that even guys like this that have made it their public crusade for decades, that we would see, just even before COVID, like even before Trump got elected, I remember NPR covering these like weird, crunchy leftists that would cause like certain outbreaks of diseases that they would say would be prevented by vaccination. And it's just like, okay.
There was that one woman with AIDS that the Foo Fighters campaigned for.
I don't recall. But I mean, just to round up my point here is that
Foo Fighters,
all this stuff
they were AIDS denialists. People forget this.
There you go. But I mean, all this stuff to just sort of round up my point is that how much they get done, I don't know. But this is sort of like the last big public consciousness issue that I think anyone can agree on.
Yeah, nobody can agree on anything else. Yeah, that's true.
And that's huge. That's huge. Especially huge if someone were really sitting behind the scenes, if there were really competent planners. I mean, I would zero in on that in a New York minute. This is something that spreads across. You have the skepticism regarding the priesthood and their failure to perform their function. I'm here talking about the postmodern materialist priesthood, of course. You've got the natural inclination to distrust other professionals like lawyers we've already discussed. And you've got these physicians, who bring you in and they take the liver out of the goat or whatever, or the sheep, I should say, and look for signs, from the gods in reading the liver, like a haruspex or whatever on the steps of the temple. They tell you, well, the signs aren't good for you, Oliver. We've taken a look, we've consulted the oracles, and well, the symptoma, the signs that we read, in the flights of the birds or in the course of the lightning through the sky suggests that, well, you've got to reform your behavior. There needs to be some lifestyle decisions made because you're placing yourself at risk. And so we counsel you to change your behavior in this way so as not to be at risk, so as not to be judged and found wanting. There's just so much archetypal, there's like a vein of I tend to think that human beings, whether or not they're conscious of these things, one of the ways that I look at the world is to assume that these things operate regardless, whether or not someone knows that this is a flattened discourse, a post-materialist discourse, and that these physicians are in fact a kind of priest. It's nevertheless true, and it operates on some level. My grandmother, when she used to go in for care in her 90s, and she would bring in these weird little cutout things. She would cut up this white polyester fabric she had, and she would hand a little tiny postage stamp sized square of this white polyester fabric to like all the nurses who came in. And she said, it's a prayer cloth, yeah. Pray to Jesus, and she would love to talk to the doctors. When the doctor came in, it was just like those days where, the old lady has the priest over for tea and the old biddies come and sit around the table and they get to talk to the priest who's knowledgeable. And he kind of does the rooster routine and talks to them and leaves and goes to the next place to get given pies and cakes and be appreciated. These are the people who have failed us. And the bottom line here isn't that maybe the price of eggs goes up. The bottom line here is that you don't get to live. Mm-hmm. You die, right? Or you get given something that kills you. So anyway, I've hammered this point too much, but I do think that there's potential there, and I often wonder about it.
Yeah, I like this point by Fabian Cartouche. Yeah. Whatever you enter into the machine on a subliminal level, the machine will process. And I mean, I think we see that in sort of the public consciousness, is that how this has been, how there are a lot of Democrats. I mean, again, how much of this is kayfabe? How much of this is because there's legitimate interest? I mean, even when Bernie Sanders was like, well, some of this Doge stuff is appropriate to look at. And, even Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic, minority leader in the House, was just like, no, I think RFK's right on a lot of issues. How much of this is that sort of rare instance of bipartisanship, which again, bipartisanship is just two guys agreeing to spit roast you on the federal level. It's just like, well, it leaves a lot of room for healthy skepticism. And I think that that's absolutely true. And so only time will tell, because again, we're all in this lame duck period. Trump has not been sworn into office. None of these guys have been appointed. Government is still in the hands of the Biden administration. It is fun to watch everyone kind of see him pardon like crazy, and to see everyone go nuts and have all these White House parties and things like that. So, I mean, that's fun to watch. But I mean, on a marketing level, on a optics level, I think that the Maha stuff, is this bizarre mix of new age, new left spirituality. And I mean, even that article from New York Magazine, they cited it and they called it conspirituality, like conspiracy meets spirituality. That, they say that the alt-right and new age movements and RFK Jr., they actually have a lot more in common than we think. They have this bizarre horseshoe theory take on it.
Well, I wanted to address that, actually. I sent you a screen cap I wanted to read.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
On Telegram.
And on Telegram.
Okay, and I can hear you guys. I'm coming right back. I just a slash. I will return, but I have Bluetooth headphones, so I will follow.
No worries. Gio, do you want to just read this? I'm not going to put a person with a trans flag in their bio on the screen, but if you want to read it, go for it.
Okay, so the reason I bring this up is because I noticed that the discourse on the political left, because of course they never monitor, they monitor us, but not to the same extent. But I noticed that the discourse on the political left, they're switching to the analysis of what right-wingers have been saying for years now about slop and the entertainment, the culture industry. And granted, the culture industry the thesis did come from the Frankfurt School. And, of course, Debord was a situationist Marxist and so forth. But when it comes to right-wing discourse, there was a harmony with that. But now I notice that the discourse of the political left is that the right wing, because of Trump, is somehow the real mainstream slop enjoyers. And like you were saying, Prudentialist, about the connection between the New Age movement, crunchy granola, healthy lifestyle stuff, and quote unquote the alt-right or far-right politics, there is something there. You know, the woke is more correct than the mainstream. So let me read you from this Impossible or this Beyond Woman. And by the way, it's one Impossible with the rainbow flag, the pink flag.
You can just say a troon.
A trans person, yeah. Trans person quote tweeting another trans person, or rather screen capping it. So this person is named Norma Reed. They're always named Zoe or Norma or
name them. Don't name them. Just read the take.
Or Lilith.
They're always named after the alleged first wife of Adam.
Yeah, exactly. So she said,
mother of abominations.
Yes.
So this person says, thinking about the drone thing, the one in New Jersey, and now it's just going to be like this forever. We just live entirely in Havana Syndrome land, where we drink raw milk and deny clown vid. She said the word. Whatever, because the pronouns are they, them. They, them / z, her. Oh, wow, that's crazy. HIR. I don't know what that is. So raw milk and deny COVID and get real weird about the potential fertility of trans children all the time. Every time a video game has a woman, we have to see the same takes on it from people who don't know how to season their box of mac and cheese. So meaning like, Heartland chuds. An entire country of entitled, aggrieved adult children doing fascism in between buying Funko. What right-wing person buys Funko Pops?
No one, but go on.
In between buying Funko Pops and driving trucks that take 10 gallons of gas per mile and incapable of seeing pedestrians under 5 feet, chugging constantly, algorithmically generated moral panics. I am just so disgusted. So this is the framework of the political left. That the political right, they're the real mainstream slop enjoyers. But notice how they have this like weird mid-90s, early 2000s version of the right wing in America that they're still driving. Remember when Hummers were a big thing? Like the Humvees.
They think that we're still stuck in this paradigm where like the Republican is like this 2006, screw the environment. I'm going to drive my Hummer. I'm going to vote for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like it's a very campy, kitschy understanding.
Yeah.
Or driving the giant truck to chase the minority kids. Do you remember that ad with the truck and the little kids?
Yeah.
Like, run!
Oh, that was crazy. No, but that's what they think. So they're gearing this that the right wing is anti-science. The right wing, they're the real slop enjoyers. I don't know anyone in the political right that buys Funko Pops, by the way. That's like a leftist thing. And so, of course, when these people, they live a totally inverted version of reality, right? And that's their daily life. Because I'm not going to say no more in case, YouTube, whatever. But they have this inverted notion of what the political right is and why we focus on public health. And I'm not the specimen of health, obviously. I know what I'm saying, but it's the Digital Archipelago Funko Pop. We have to market this, Prude.
No. I'll take a shit coin before a Funko Pop. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take DA coin. No, but the point being is that I noticed that I you know what it's like. Okay, what was that show with what's that guy's name? That was it wasn't The West Wing. It was the guy who was the comedian that was in Dumb and Dumber, Jeff Daniels.
Yes, The Newsroom is what you're thinking of.
The Newsroom, where he's like, 30% of the American public believes in angels. And it's like this big Jon Stewart irony cell. Like, you guys are a bunch of chud idiots and you believe in God and you believe in raw milk. And it's like, that's what they're doing. It's the same old Jon Stewart. What does academic agent call it? Cynical snark. It's the same thing over and over and over again. And now they're doing it when it comes to the right wing adopting the view of crunchy granola, public health through working out and eating right and so forth. And it's like they're doing the same thing. But it's like instead now they're the ones who are trusting the public experts. And you're the one who's enjoying the Funko Pops and you're enjoying the language. This person's probably a Zoomer. Well, you never know with the coding socks people. But this person's deploying the same language as the left wing in the 1990s. When it came to like, oh, you're talking about the Satanic Panic and listening to Marilyn Manson and the McMartin School, which was 100% real, by the way. Yeah, the soy right. They say it, the soy right. Yeah, that's what they call it now. The soy right. Yes, that's what they call it now. The soy right. But the thing is, though, these irony cells, they think that they're incredibly innovative by calling us soy right. But this shit, the same attitude comes whole cloth from the 1990s and the 2000s. It's Jon Stewart. It's anti-moral majority. It's like you're a bunch of fucking bumpkin hicks that still cling on to your guns and your Bible. And it's the same shit over and over again. But they believe they discovered this groundbreaking truth nuke by calling it soy right. And you know what? Yeah, there is something about like the natural health grifters and the Sigma grind set people. I'm not, they are correct about certain things. But when it comes to like the awareness of this stuff, it's like, it's incredible. It's like, it's the same old shit. And if you've been alive long enough, if you're a Gen X or older millennial, you've already experienced this. But now I notice that they're turning this, because even though they still have a predominant grasp on mainstream culture, on the mainstream culture industry, because of Trump's victory, because of Elon Musk, because of these podcast bros, they think that, oh, now the right wing, they're the real mainstream culture, and we're the true counterculture. Like, they've been doing this shit since the 60s, really. It's it's soy over. And yeah, like, I agree with Andrew Kelly here. There is a lot of right-wing slop, our side for an enemy, but yeah, it's true. I agree. There is a lot of right-wing slop. But the narrative change that we're the true mainstream culture, that's bullshit. That's like, oh man, sorry, rant end. I just had to bring that up because I thought it was so ridiculous. This narrative they're pushing of the soy right, it's incredible.
I love when you get excited, Gio. My problem is that I went to Grok and I tried to generate images of you guys eating Funko Pops, and I don't know what the fuck came up for Gio, but one did come up for Prude, and I posted it. But what's strange is it was one of 4 versions. I posted it in the replies on X. But the
that doesn't look that bad. I look like Saint Nick. That's not. I like that one. But share that on screen.
But like two of them showed like some black guy, and all the ones when I said produce Giant Gio eating a Funko Pop, they all looked like some sort of I don't know, a Brazilian or Lebanese sort of mystery meat guy with a pop. So. Yeah, fezzes.
I'm Indian or something, yeah. Because it says I'm Canadian, so it like assumes I'm Indian.
They just assumed and naturally, like,
oh my God.
Demand to get my cigarettes for a lower price. Yes.
Yeah, it's very yeah, they go to reserves now. Yeah. No, it's very funny. Haas of Decline calling it the soy right. I mean, have you looked at what Haas of... Oh, never mind. I'm not... I shouldn't be that...
The web comic who identifies as a woman, and I'm not going to give them any real attention.
Yeah, it's so... Yeah.
It's hard to maintain that the left aren't still in control of the culture when even the Daily Wire are considered far right by them. Yeah. I mean, like, that's just the fundamental truth about it. Like, on one, and I think this is just the limitation of the medium, right? Like, on one platform is the right in charge, or quote unquote in charge. Like, there are still obvious. The right is
tolerated, not in charge.
The right is tolerated on one platform, just one platform, and that is X. On everywhere else, I mean, I get it. Mark Zuckerberg and a few others have donated to the campaign, but let's face it, the cultural hegemony is still on the left. The way that the greatest, Hicklib TV show of all time, that has recently come to an end, that of Yellowstone, ends obviously with just basic ethnic cleansing of white people, right? Like the whole, the Indians take over the ranch and shit on the graves or whatever. Like, all that's still there.
Really
There's still
in the Yellow Soy.
Yeah, that's how it ends. And and again, like, all that's there. There's still and even the mainstream right, like the Daily Wire and so on. Like, sure, some things can get addressed, but at the end of the day, that they're still going to agree with 90% of a lot of lefty priors. And or our friend Orr McIntyre had said this today. He says, "I really can't believe that so many people who agree with 90% of all leftist issues find disagreeing with the final 10% as this revolutionary act." And that's really where we are. And so, like, the soy right or whatever. Like, sure, there are some like people who are clearly got issues that may not like, someone had posted this screenshot. I think it was like a Reddit or a Steam page thing, and it's like, do you know any like non-woke anime dating sims? And it's like, you need help and you need God. Please meet him sooner rather than later. And it's just like, okay, so there clearly we have our own problems on our own side, but I'm far more willing to deal with that side of the problem on our end then I want, House of Decline never getting like a syndicated fucking cartoonist column at like the Chicago Tribune or something. Clearly, there's a huge, quite a few bigger issues to deal with than we have here. But again,
Big Kid Rant 3 had a great point here, by the way.
Yeah, this one.
The right to the left is a giant monolithic hive mind led by Dennis Prager, Ben Shapiro, and Simple. No third mind among the supposed right-wing experts. And exactly, Kamara said tactically confusing the DR with normie cons. No, of course. I mean, they confuse the biggest slop merchants on the normie con right with your average like anime racist, which is pretty funny. But like, but then at the same time, I think that there is like sort of an underlying thread between all these ideologies, but I don't think Ben Shapiro is like leading the anime youngin. I don't think that's true. I don't think like these anti-extremism experts, they really don't have like a pretty good map of like, they don't have a pretty good cognitive mapping about what the right is actually about, to use a Frederick Jameson term. Like the fact that you would say Funko Pop's an equation with the right wing online is like, this is fucking stupid.
What the fuck?
Yeah, like, I don't know where that came from. I tried explaining this to K-pop leftists yesterday that no, you're not morally justified if you put anyone who says they're a conservative on a list of the Austrian Painter fans and try to dox them. Well, I mean, Internet Friend and a few of my other followers, they're fighting an uphill battle trying to preserve a right-wing form of the K-pop. So I don't know how that's going to turn out, but we'll see what happens. No, it's very funny because I do think that a lot of culture war is slop and is drack, and like fighting over women in video games or trans people in video games. Yeah, it's fucking cool. I know it's cool. And there's people that make money off of it.
Why? Why is it cool? Other than like it's part of like there's like the the normie centrist media ecosystem. On one hand, like video games.
Tim Pool makes millions of dollars.
Well, sure, okay. Like if I wanted to like sell out, I would stop doing what I'm doing. I would make a new channel and I would do a daily show bitching about the state of video games, like the fucking quartering. I do agree with, although I think it's really funny because the quartering, I think either got snookered into doing an ad or they said, yeah, I'm willing to do this when they did that. Sponsored advertisement for Antelope Hill Publishing. It's like, yeah, it's just so to watch the quartering say like you can read like the Burning Souls from Leon DeGraw, and I was like, dude, you are so fucked. But at the same time, like all aspects of culture must be taken over. They must be dominated. This must be the prevailing message because all forms of media in which we inhabit are indoctrinating. They are a representative of the dominant culture and what's going to be there. And of course, when it's an international market of billions and billions of dollars, that also means your enemies are going to take advantage of that too. Like Tencent is very much involved with respects to putting in all sorts of DEI and ESG initiatives with the millions of dollars they fund, more than any other country on earth, into the American market. And that's a very important thing to consider. But on top of that, I mean, like, yeah, these things matter because they're part of everyday life and culture. Like, for every, like, Kingdom Come Deliverance, there are a million games, like Veilguard and all that other stuff that are going to overwhelmingly be the center of attention. And that cycle is correct. Like, you can obviously say that for, like, the critical drinkers, the quarterings of the world, like, they make their money off of the state of the world continuously getting worse. That is true. But at the same time, like these positions that they're putting forward here are mind-blowing just even 5 or 6 years ago. Like, when I was, what year is it now? 2024 were the end of it. Like, even at the end of my freshman year of college 10 years ago, the idea that like every single video game character is going to have like the same couple of like black actresses or the pushing of gay rights and whatnot. Like, no, that was unthinkable. Like the greatest thing that I was enjoying in 2014 was oh fuck, I can't even remember what was
Call of
playing.
Duty.
But, well, I don't know. I didn't really play a lot of that.
No, that was 2012. Sorry, that was.
But I mean, like, still, whether the Battlefield games or the rest, like, that was unthinkable. I mean, then you saw that with Battlefield 5 and the rest. But I think that really the kitchification of what you could call the soy right, I think, comes from the commodification and the kitchification of traditional religion. Yeah. I mean, like, Catholicism, Orthodoxy, High Church Protestantism, all of that has its kitchified degree of like, well, if I collect all these things and I do all these things and I post about it, suddenly I'm saved and I'm holy. It's like,
that is sort of like a soy right type.
You have to, like, I'm sorry, like, you have to die. Like, that's like, and I don't mean that in a Fed posty way, but like just consider the Christian doctrine. You've got to die daily, and you have to be dead to the world, and consider all that with actual serious degree. It's partially why I don't post very much on religion, because I try very hard to take it seriously. But I think that when you look at all that stuff that's going out in the world, you have to look at sort of the big issue with respects to, how much of this is being pushed with respects to, are you doing it because you're desperate for meaning and that you will find yourself being a willing victim to a snake oil salesman that might be wearing a garb or whatever? Or is it more along the fact that there's just the general exhaustion? Like, I am so tired. I mean, even fucking Elon Musk of all people was just like, don't you like it when you're playing a video game and then it gets ruined by some DEI woke bullshit? And it's like, yes, I am actually, Mr. Musk, I really am. And so people will seek any answer and will try and find anything that they can do. And I mean, even Semiogogue, you've done some work on this back when American Krogan was still active with his mods for Fallout 4 to make things more like, racially homogenous to the idea of a 1950s Americana aesthetic, which is like, that's a good effort. And if you want to put forward into that, that should be encouraged. But at the same time, no, this stuff still matters because it's one facet of the culture, and video games is still one of the last male dominated spaces. Although the same cannot be said for its studios. And this was ironically what I wrote about for the Frontier magazine that finally came out. And, we've had these cycles, these boom and bust cycles in the marketplace, and then people leave to create their own studios. And I mean, even now, to make good indie games, they're still out there and they're still popular. Although for every good indie game, there's like a million depression quests. So like your odds may vary, but it does illustrate that today, hopefully this shit just dies. Like, I hope the bubble bursts and things collapse, and that like Neil Druckmann will land on his laurels and be on a podcast or on some sort of consulting company. But at the very least, Naughty Dog goes under or something like that. Like, you can hope for it, but at the same time, like, the domination of the left
doesn't that sound like a prawn company, there. Naughty Dog?
It really does.
Isn't there that other
did you say prawn?
Yes,
prawn
I did.
Company? Like a shrimp company?
No, like he means PR0N, like to say porn, because Gio can't say words.
I just love the idea of a prawn company. This is
like
when old men try to talk to the young men.
A porn company that says dog in the title. I don't know.
I don't know, Gio, because I don't know that much about porn companies.
No, but like but Naughty Dog does it not sound like a porn company?
It sounds like something that could be bad, yeah.
No, but you know what's funny though? I wanted to get you guys' take. Do you notice that like 2023 and 2024, they've sort of been like a return to like mid-2000s slop, like pure slop, pure apolitical slop. Like you had Oliver Anthony was political, but then you had like the Costco guys and the Rizzler and Haley fucking Coctua. Who was before them? There were like a bunch of like these like random low-class people that the culture decided to like prop up as like, public attention. So I think like I like people want to go back to like the Honey Boo Boo thing. I notice. I don't know.
No, that's a good
Neil
point.
deGrasse Tyson as being that way. Like if you were to pull someone out of a fucking like a Burger King managerial role and elevate him, as a science guy. Yeah.
Black science man.
This is the whole like return to the 90s thing. Like even now, Musk and the rest of them, they're like, well, we could return to like the TLC of 2010. Like we can go back to Honey Boo Boo, we can go back to Maury Popovich or whatever. But like even then, I've said this before on the show, and I've said this on elsewhere. Like, isn't it sad that we've gotten to a point where we're asking for 2012 aren't you depressed that we want to go back to like Barack Obama era level of politics? Because things have gotten so bad in this country that like the basic question of, can this country maintain civilizational standards of things like law and order, brought to you by the same society that wanted to put Daniel Penny in fucking jail. Also creators of the hit new film, Derek Chauvin is a Political Prisoner. We want to go back to 2012, the good old days. And that should drive you to fucking insanity that like, at this point in time, the world's richest people and the rest of America was like, yeah, maybe we should go back to that. And it's like, we should go back even further. But like,
no, I was about to say there's so many years to choose from.
There's so many great points in
1937, you know, or what was the Mongol invasion?
1896. Yeah. Like, there's so many better years. You know, don't we miss cringing at Justin Bieber? Now we're stuck with like the fucking Rizzler or whatever they call it.
The Rizzler, yeah.
Sad. It's sad.
They were on AEW. I don't know, like apparently the old man was a professional wrestler like 20 years ago. So then he like got into shape again to do like one match with, I forget who he wrestled some jobber, I forget who it was. But that's pretty funny. Yeah, Return to Honey Boo Boo, there you go, Truth Nuke. No, but that's what I mean. Like it seems like the popular culture just like picks a random nobody to like have celebrity. You still portray when they're getting accused of rape and drop the hard R IRL without people impersonating you, but it was still really bad. Well, 2012, yeah, you're right. I mean, no, I should say that because like when was Duke Lacrosse? 2013?
That's a good question.
Mattress Girl. Yeah, Jesus.
No, that was Mattress Girl was
Hold on, I'll look it up.
Oh fuck!
I love it.
Oh no,
who was that guy who said
2006? 2006 was Duke Lacrosse.
2006?
Yeah, this goes back much further than 2012.
Yeah, like I don't know what you guys are
the
talking
Dear
about.
Colleague letter is bad. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's pretty rough in terms of what Obama had done to colleges and whatnot. But the other thing to really consider out of all of this is going to be that that's all still enshrined in the law. Yeah. This is the big takeaway. We can talk about a vibe shift all we want. We can talk about consumer confidence and whatever. But at the end of the day, the biggest issue that's going to stand out is that all of this shit is ingrained in disparate impact. It is ingrained in ESG. And we already saw the consequences of it. Is that, well, we said that we needed to step up. So in 2022, we hired like 96% non-white to white. Like, I mean... Yeah. These things are not going away in terms of the power structure. The incentives are still there. And even if I'm wrong, clearly they think that it's still the case. Otherwise, they wouldn't be making shit like we saw at the Game Awards. They wouldn't be making shit like, all these TV shows that clearly hamper in the progressive cultural notions. Or they wouldn't be making, this is the biggest front that's really going to happen, is that all historical content going forward, and we saw this in 1917, we saw this with the TV show or that movie that they made for Channel 4, The Blitz or whatever, they're now going to have to recontextualize that actually Europe was never majority white, even in 1940s. It was still this great multicultural mix where it was like the plucky minorities versus the white man, even though you're in the midst of fucking, Blitzkrieg and the battle for Britain. Like, that's how it's going to be going forward. And until, either, I don't know, we just start banning all of that and we institute some kind of Hays Code again, I just don't see it going away. And that's the biggest aspect about this high. Like, we're on our own hopium. Like, we won the election. It's like, no, you're just enjoying the political pressure release valve. You're enjoying the fact that you just shot ropes all over yourself after you saw the election results come in. And now I think it's time to realize, things are still really bad and things are still very much in the wrong direction. And the difference between sort of the political aspect of it and the cultural
Apparently
is
Zinc
that...
helps you with that, by the way.
Huh?
Apparently Zinc helps you with that. That's what the esoteric health dude bro, like the bro science people say, that Zinc helps you. Like, never mind.
No, I was just gonna say that going back, somebody said in the comments that we should go back to 96. And I'm remembering 1991 when I moved out to San Francisco as a cool kid and I was driving my vintage old BMW motorcycle around and I had this cute girlfriend, and I remember I went to her, she met me at my place after I had come home from the East Bay on BART, and I'd had to walk from the train station in Oakland, and I said those goddamn hard R's were, causing trouble and hollering at me and all this stuff, and she was like, don't you ever use that word, you're better than that. Like, that was now it was in it was in San Francisco in 1991. But be aware that like this shit goes back further. I mean, the minimum return is like 1963 because everything goes tits up in 64.
That was like that one video of the guy in the street. He's like, "Would you say that word?" And the girl's like, "I would never say that word. That's terrible. How dare you ask me?" And then like the guy, like this guy in glasses, just takes the mic. He's just like screams. That was funny. I forget that clip. I forget who it was by, but yeah, selenium as well helps you in that regard. Anyways,
Sweet God,
Gio gets
Let's
one
go back to
girlfriend,
geopolitics.
and then this is what we're talking about.
This is geopolitics. Geopolitics.
This is no. This
right?
is geodrama. This is geodrama.
Yeah, there you go.
But I have to admit that this is excellent. Like as Gio works himself up, as he gets that energy going, and then Prude puts the glasses on, looking like a late 70s, early 80s CIA analyst out of like 3 Days of the Condor or something. We've arrived.
All right.
We have arrived.
Sigma Taylor.
Okay,
That's probably the worst thing I have seen in a long time.
That's like the worst thing we've ever read on TV. No,
and I'm so glad that it was Gio that read it.
Yeah, yeah. But do we want to do Canada really briefly and then?
Yes, let's do Canada. Let's go down.
We'll finish for Ukraine.
Let's go down with the ship that is the Trudeau government.
Oh boy.
I know. I look incredulous with the glasses on, but these really help with the blue light stuff that I have to deal with at work.
Yeah,
my eyes are killing me. But yeah, so what's going on? What's her name? Chrystia Freeland resigned.
Yeah.
And what was she part of? What was her role? Finance minister.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, she was more than that because as
break
you
it
know,
down.
Canada,
Gio, break it down.
Okay, so Canada, unlike America, we don't really have an official vice prime minister. Okay, we have a second in command that takes on a very important role. Now, that second in command
is that the Chinese lesbian with the weirdly misshapen face?
No, that was Tam. That was Tam she was the health minister during COVID. Chrystia Freeland's the Ukrainian woman. So Chrystia Freeland, traditionally in Canada, it's always usually been the finance minister. I could be wrong with that. But for example, Chrétien had a very good finance minister, Joe Flaherty, who was very, he basically weathered the storm when there was various economic dips and so forth. Stephen Harper also had a very good finance minister. Hence why people can argue kicking the can down, but hence why we have more or less staved off the housing crisis back in the mid-2000s, right? Because of the Harper government. Not to say I'm totally 100% pro Harper because, Harper was like a neocon, whatever. But anyways, so Chrystia Freeland was the finance minister. She came to popularity as a economic and a geopolitics writer. She wrote that book. I actually had to read that book in undergrad called Plutocrats, where she's like, half of it's like talking about how terrible these plutocrats are, but also the book has this like weird tone where she's like fangirling these elite people. It's very funny, very funny. So Chrystia Freeland, she was there for a long time. She was Justin Trudeau's second in command. And there was there was a boiling rift between them. A number of key ministers left or resigned. And Chrystia Freeland yesterday or the day before handed in her resignation, saying that she no longer has confidence in the Trudeau government. And now we saw directly after that the guy that's basically helping keep Trudeau in power used to appear in cutaways in some old History Channel. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she did. So she gives this massive blow to Trudeau, and he puts in his childhood best friend, Travis LeBlanc. Not Travis LeBlanc. It was some other guy named LeBlanc. Travis LeBlanc is an old head alt-writer. Anyways, so he puts his best friend in there, and Chrystia Freeland resigns. And so now you have, which I never thought was possible, because Jagmeet Singh he's going to get fucked if there's ever a conservative government. The leader of the NDP that's helping keep Trudeau in power, because Trudeau, you have to remember, Trudeau technically has a minority government, but because he's in coalition with the NDP with Jagmeet Singh, the Sikh guy, he says now that if they were to wait till February after Trump is inaugurated, that he will sign off on a no confidence vote. Because if you realize that in Canada, unlike in the UK, the parties, they shiv their leaders in the back all the time. Like if you look at the disastrous Tory years recently, I mean, you had like Boris Johnson. Who's the woman's name?
Kimmy, or the one who got kicked out?
Yeah, the one who got kicked out.
God damn it, what's her name? Yeah, who was there for like 4 days or whatever.
Oh, Liz Truss.
Yeah.
Liz Truss, yeah, Liz Truss. Yeah, Truss the plan, right? Then you had the Indian guy.
Don't say his name. Yes, don't. Yes, that horrible, scrawny little. Well, I can't say these things.
Well, he was more of like a bureaucrat more than anything. So in Britain, you have this legal precedent that parties don't have this inherent supremacy towards the leader. They're more or less just functionaries. In Canada, we work way different. Not way differently. We have a parliamentary system that's very similar to Britain. But in Canada, we have parliamentary supremacy. We have supremacy of the Prime Minister's office. Very, very rarely do you have a vote of non-confidence. And even more exceedingly rarely do you have parties basically kicking out leaders. The only time I could think of is when Stephen Harper crushed the Liberals back in the mid-2000s. They had like Stefan Dion. They had fucking Michael Ignatieff, who was like the Harvard professor, technocrat, World Economic Forum guy. And now they want to bring in Mark Carney, who is also a World Economic Forum guy, the guy that destroyed the Bank of England. He's in the council with BlackRock. You know, he's total globalist, right? So the move forward would be for Trudeau to stay there for at least till the end of the year, to have a vote of non-confidence, that would spark a federal election, and basically Pierre Poilievre would get maybe a majority government. Who knows, right? But you had a bunch of these ministers leaving in Canada. It's just a total shit show for the Trudeau government. Like, he's really panicking right now. And, you know, it's very funny because he said like he was like the first like male feminist prime minister, but like he's like thrown several women off under the bus. Like he threw this Indigenous woman under the bus, Judy Rybold. Very funny, very funny. So yeah, things are not looking good in Canada. Basically, Trudeau has entered his lame duck phase. And I think that Jagmeet, in terms of the NDP, they certainly do not want a conservative government. But you never know, right? Because even if Jagmeet's saying that he will vote a vote of non-confidence, that's huge. That means Trudeau's done, right? Unless they like get Mark Carney in there or they get some other guy. Like, there are a lot of old heads that have even been there since Chrétien in the Liberal Party that have now they're openly coming out saying they're very skeptical of Justin's ability of leadership. And the whole thing between him and Trump and him having to like go to Mar-a-Lago, and it's like I made that meme about the honky tonk man shoot about Chief Jay Strongbow, where I said like, you know, Trudeau, he had to go to Mar-a-Lago and where they in the basement where they do business. And that was the worst thing Trudeau ever had to do, was apologize to Donald J. Trump. So, you know, and, you know, Trump, to his credit, like he's hammering on the whole, like, governor of Canada, the 51st state called Canada. So,
but see, that's what I want to ask. That's what I want to ask. If I may cut in, because you're similarly not terse. No,
go ahead. I'm done, Semiogogue. Go ahead. Yeah.
No. I love those who are not terse. You are my soul brother, shield brother, Gio. But I do have to ask. There is an interesting coincidence in time, you know, in terms of Trump's remarks about the 51st state and basically just slapping the shit out of Trudeau publicly, and then all this happens. So, what I mean. I'm guessing. I know fuck all about Canada, and I'd actually like to know less about Canada, which is probably why I shouldn't ask this question, but I will nevertheless. Is it possible, for example, that a whole bunch of people behind the scenes in Canada said, maybe Trudeau should go back to doing bong hits in Indian costumes in girls' dorm rooms and get the fuck out of here, because he's become a liability. If Trump is actually talking this way, we do recognize that in many respects we are kind of a 51st state. So this motherfucker needs to go.
Yeah.
So I'm just guessing, but is that a possibility?
Yes. I don't know if it's to the degree in the Liberal Party. I think old heads are basically saying it. But what's very interesting, Semiogogue, is that what you just said is exactly what Pierre Poilievre, as the leader of the Conservative Party, he just came right out and said it. He said, we need a general election because I'm a serious candidate, and I know, because I'm a conservative, I know how to deal with Donald J. Trump, because we need like national leadership to deal with whatever Trump wants to do with us. It's the same. And what's very funny is that Trudeau, he totally neglected the very thing his own father said about Canada. He denied the wisdom of his father. I'm doing a PPP bit, but anyways,
which father?
Trudeau. What did you say, Prud?
I said which father?
Yeah, which father, right? But Castro had a very interesting phrase about America as well. But Pierre Trudeau, he said back, I believe during the Nixon days, that Canada is a mouse compared to an elephant, or a mouse living next to an elephant. So in a way, Poilievre has accepted the sort of like Mearshheimerian realism about who really controls the North American continent. It's the United States of America. It's Washington. So the selling point, now here's the difference though. The Liberals are trying to sell it that Pierre Poilievre is basically a fascist like Trump, that he's like Trump Canada, right? Whatever. And they try to say that he took photos with these far-right Diagolon people and all these fucking idiot Canadian Antifa people that take this shit seriously. They're saying like Pierre Poilievre is like sympathetic to the far right, which is bullshit, right? But the thing is, the difference is that that's the demonization campaign of the Leaf Lib, is to basically tie any conservative to America. America is the Jesus land, moral majority enemy of the Leafs, right? And the only time Canadian Liberals have ever had a nationalistic sentiment was to hate America. That's it. But Pierre Poilievre is saying, listen, we can't really deal with America because every time in the court system with softwood lumber in the 90s or with oil in the 80s, every time Canadians have gone up against American corporations or American governments, we've lost. So Pierre Poilievre is saying, you need a real leader to deal with Donald J. Trump, to go to Mar-a-Lago and say, listen, Trump, this is what we're going to do. We can find a happy medium. We're going to help secure the borders, and we're going to do the best we can. Please, God, do not tariff us into oblivion. And so what does Trudeau do? He announces, kind of like the Tories in Britain, he announces that we're going to fund border security. We're going to have like security drones that are going to be manned by Canadians to police the largely unpoliced border between America and Canada. So he's like really panicking, and now he's rescinding the student visas. Like he would never do that years ago. So in a way, it's sort of like the way that, you know how Kamala Harris, she tried to get ahead of Trump by being like Trump light. Trudeau is doing a similar move, and it's not going to work because people realize that why would I vote for Trudeau again when I could just take my chances with Poilievre and say like, okay, well, Trump can do whatever he wants to us, right? I mean, I don't really believe he's going to annex us. That's ridiculous, right? But when it comes to trade wars, when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to economic and cultural influence and everything else, I mean, we're a mouse compared to an elephant. I mean, that's really, there's no question. There's no question. So, you know, we never know what's going to happen. But the fact that ministers are leaving left and right, Trudeau's gone. He's going to go back to being a drama teacher or whatever, or he's going to have some kind of like speaking tour sinecure or some bullshit. I don't know. He could do whatever. It's a, he could go hand out Krugerrands in buckets. He disgusts me. Yeah, more than any human being I've ever laid eyes upon. And I'm not saying that there are people that like, I'm not saying he's the most evil. Right, you know, right. There are far more disgusting people in the moral sense, but in terms of just being a
fucking dog's breakfast of a human, being a shit splatter on the side of a toilet. Like whenever he speaks, whenever I look at him, like, you know, with his carefully crossed legs to crush his own balls as a kind of like, you know, a penance, you know, he's
He took
the
his son
sooner-
to see Barbie. Remember that one?
No, I don't. See, I know nothing about this strange
Oh
place
yeah,
where
he took
where
his
people
son
say
to,
flag.
yeah, he took his son to say to see Barbie, but and
And
then
he
they
took
got
his daughter to see Oppenheimer.
yeah, he took his daughter to
Wait,
see Oppenheimer.
His son,
He has children, allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah.
but
'Cause
he
remember-
took his son to Barbie.
No, but
Yeah.
he did that as a gender, like male feminist thing. He took his son.
And he just had a speech a couple of days ago where he's speaking at some women's forum. He's like, I just want those people to know that you have an ally in government. I am the And then some like some guy, some teenager was jogging next to him just recently, and they're just like, "Get a load of this fag," and it was just like,
Oh,
he's a
that, yeah,
joke.
he was like some black kid too.
Yeah, like some kid, and it's just like, "Get a load of this fag," and it's just like it's perfect, you know, like
Yeah,
that's sort of the point in which you've got it here. But I mean, like I guess the question's really got to be, and I think that, I mean, we're also seeing this in Germany too. Like the governments are falling apart. There's going to be elections. Everyone kind of has to get a different, I guess, set of leaders in to deal with like, oh, well, Trump's back in office. Like shit. Because this was like, I think the attitude has really changed. Because like you noticed this in 2016, like the popular consensus that was discussed in like The Economist, that was discussed in Die Welt and all these other like German publications was like, well, America's still America. Like Trump can like be gone in 4 years, 8 at worst. Like we'll carry on. And then like, but this political movement of whatever Trump is going to leave behind in the post-Trump era, I guess these leaders have to deal with it. But also like, it's not like Trudeau has left his country in any strong position. It's an open secret that the Chinese and that the Indians are there. You've imported an entire ethnic conflict from India into your country, a massive housing crisis, immigration out the wazoo, and every single aspect from gun control to killing off, like, you know, most of your white people through euthanasia. It's all there. I mean, like, at what point in time do you like not look around and be like, this guy's got to fucking go, you know? And I think that seems to be the political consensus, at least in Canada, amongst the left and your, TPUSA style conservatives, that it's just like, well, it's time for him to go because he's been in power for what, almost 10 years?
Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask. How long is it now that this rectal polyp has been in office?
I think
since Barack Obama,
2015. Yeah, 2015. Yeah,
because he had famously said, because it's 2015 when he talked about like the gender,
the current year stuff.
Oh yeah, the current year shtick.
That one, yeah. No, but the thing is with Trudeau is that here's my prediction though. One last prediction before I ask about Germany. And who was in the chat? Was it Kyle Warner? Where is it? Was it Kyle Warner? Yeah, that I'm over respect. The U.S. is bad, not having more women in politics. He lectured right before he fired his female finance minister. Of course, you know, Chrystia Freeland also was a very big proponent of, she really pushed all the pro-Ukrainian stuff. So that's another thing too, is like Canada basically gutting its own military to send to Ukraine. And there's a lot of, I think per capita, not in terms of like material soldiers, but like per capita, Canada has the highest amount of mercenaries that have, besides the United States, that have gone over to quote unquote help Ukraine. Because there's a lot of ethnic Ukrainians in Canada. We have the highest diaspora of Ukrainians outside of Russia, of course. But, you know, that's another story. So Trudeau, here's my prediction. When they get Mark Carney in there, when they kick out Trudeau, all the Leaf libs, all those like ridiculous accounts you see on Twitter, they're all boomers and shit. They're gonna cope hardcore. They're gonna be like, you know what? This guy that's on the board of BlackRock, he's good actually. He knows what he's doing. I mean, yeah, he kind of destroyed the Bank of England, but you know, I mean, it's like, so you're gonna have a lot of coping and seething because they believe that that Pierre Poilievre is like Trump Jr. He's a fascist, and Kyle Warner's correct. Like Pierre Poilievre, I don't see him doing anything with Canadian immigration significantly. He appeals a lot to Sikhs, like every conservative politician does, the base Sikhs. And so, you know, I mean, he's not really going to do that he's not going to do anything dramatic. And yeah, wow, someone from the tribe inviting one ethnic. Yeah, exactly. And that is correct. What Vitalis said, that is 100% correct. The Canadian general trained Azov battalion in Ukraine. So, and there was a strange thing where a disgraced Canadian general accused of rape, he disappeared in Ukraine, and he had connections.
And didn't they have that
and Azov?
somebody
ahead,
something Chuk? You had that guy appear to address the parliament who was a former mid-century German fellow.
Yeah.
But I want to ask about what's that fucking French place? Quebec. You have certainly my friend, Prude's friend as well, and I would assume you know him. Skeptical Waves is often pointing out interesting things about how Quebec still does have, despite absolutely off the chart shit liberty, they do still cleave to certain let's call them ethno-nationalist considerations.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, Trudeau, to my very limited understanding of all things Canadian, does come out of that milieu, and he has to rely to some extent upon Quebec as one of his citadels. What the fuck is going on with Quebec in all of this?
Quebec is very strange because they have a history of being a sort of wild card. Like, if Quebec does not like you, it's over. So, I mean, he has maintained a number of key districts in Quebec, a number of key ridings, but I think if they're pissed off enough at him, they're going to shiv him the back, kind of like what they did to his father in the 80s, right? So Quebec is always a political wild card because Quebec gets what Quebec wants. And you basically have to win a number of key places around Montreal, around Quebec City, around Gatineau to win, to become the first past the post system. Quebec is of vital importance. Now, Poilievre has somewhat of a connection there, but he's not beholden to the Laurentian elite to the extent that Trudeau is. So a lot of people are looking to Poilievre. I mean, yeah, he's part of the Calgary elite, the conservatard elite, but a lot of people are looking at him to say that, okay, he's not someone who's beholden to them. But what he can do is he can sort of galvanize a lot of people within Quebec, a lot of politicians that are pissed off at Trudeau currently. So I don't personally know which way Quebec is going to go, but I don't see them voting for Trudeau significantly again. I think they sort of they're like, well, we're not really going to get a good deal with him anyways. And has a crisis in Anglophone Canada. So Quebec is like, well, we don't want to be left in lurch, right? So you never know. I mean, Quebec has shivved the Liberal Party in the back before. Now, yes, there was a kissing cousin relationship between the Liberals and Quebec. But that can change because Quebec does what Quebec wants. They don't really care. They'd
have to trade somebody in if they're not going to be able to deliver for them. I mean, exactly. Why keep your guy if he can't fucking serve his function, especially when he looks like that?
Because what Quebec can do is they'll just vote for the Bloc. They'll vote for Bloc Québécois. And they'll be like, you know what? Fuck you guys. Fuck the rest of Canada. We're just going to vote for the Bloc. And that's it. I'm not that knowledgeable on it, but Quebec has basically swerved federal electoral politics time and again. And you basically, they're a political reality in Canada. They're not going away. And every politician knows they have to deal with Quebec eventually. That's the only way they're going to win. And Poilievre knows that. And there's a lot of strong conservative ridings, even in Montreal now. So, I mean, for example, what happened when the Liberals got blown out with Stephen Harper, Quebec just refused to show up. They just voted for the Bloc. Well, we'll vote conservative, we'll vote the Bloc. We're not going to vote Liberal because they had a particularly weak leadership and, they didn't like Michael Ignatieff for whatever reason. And so they're like, fuck you guys. It's like, yeah, look at Blood Satellite in this chat. There's a kissing cousin relationship. Yeah. Well, the thing is when it comes to Trudeau, though, his father was actually way more harder on Quebec separatism. But here's the cleverness of Pierre Trudeau, okay? He didn't do like what the British did with the Irish when North Ireland, right? What he did was he let them have their little referendums. He let them have their own political party. And, you know, the referendums didn't go anywhere because, of course, they're going to fucking rig it anyways. You know, was it Parizeau Dimes? Was it Parizeau that said money in the ethnic vote? He was referring to Anglo-Canada, you know, basically influencing the Quebec referendum in the 70s, I think it was. Or was it the 80s? I forget. I think it was the 70s. Or no, that was the 90s. It was the 90s one. Money in the ethnic vote. So Trudeau, he's like, instead of going to war with these people like the fucking British did with the Irish, just let them have what they want a little bit, and we're going to fucking rig it anyway. So, like, you know, that's why Quebec separatism is no more, because Anglophone Canada just had to wait. That's all they had to do. They had to wait. It's like, it's just votes that they didn't have. You know, that's the way the Liberals always think about Quebec. Just votes that we don't have. Who cares? Right? So, but that equation is failing because I don't really think Trudeau Jr. knows how to deal with Quebec anymore. You know what I mean? Like, he like, you know, I mean, come on, the guy's not very bright. So it was a brilliant move that Pierre Trudeau did to sidestep Quebec separatism by giving them the carrot on the stick, unlike the British when it came to Irish nationalism in North Ireland. So, you know, Trudeau, to his credit, he saw the way the wind was blowing, right? I mean, he didn't want to get into war with Quebec, you know, come on. You know, I mean, the FLQ thing was, you know, it was peanuts compared to the Troubles. So, you know, I mean, Quebec is always a wild card, and you can't really, unless you're on the ground, unless you're a French speaker, especially, you're not going to know what those people think. And the Quebec political class is very entrenched. They've always had a history of corruption. Yeah, it is. Quebec's their own thing. I don't think they're going to vote for Trudeau. I personally don't think Quebec they're going to have a high tolerance for Justin anymore. Not to say they like the Conservatives, because historically Quebec was the first to become, you know, during the Silent Revolution in the 60s, they got rid of the Catholic Church's influence on Quebec society. They were the first to become shit libs. They were first to become New Agers. But Quebec has maintained a linguistic ethno-nationalism, which is unlike a lot of other nationalisms in Europe. But nevertheless, you know, they still have an awareness of their own identity, if you will. So, yeah, sorry, I'm just popping off about Canadian politics. I don't know if it's interesting or not.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
it's
I
required.
maxing, of course. You know?
I mean, it's a requirement for us to know what's going on up there. I mean, between the Chinese, the Indians, and the immigration problem, like America has to know about it. And whatever happens up there, particularly with its progressive bloc, that's just going to be part and parcel of what we deal with come, you know, with the progressives in America. Like, I mean, Canada for the longest time in American politics has always been viewed as the model. Alongside sort of Nordic, you know, mixed market economy distribution programs for entitlements. Like those, it's either why can't we be nice and polite like Canada, or why can't we have it like that? Now we know.
Why can't we have made like Canada?
Why can't we have that? Yeah, why can't we have made like that?
Yeah.
Why can't we have a nice state-sponsored Kevorkian system and shit like that? You know, and it's sort of just sort of like, at the end of the day, everything that comes about, that's sort of what America they want it to be. Minus probably like the importing of ethnic conflicts, but we have enough of that as it is already in America. You might get a kick out of this one, Oliver. I was at a conference not too long ago, and one of the things that this like, I think she was with like USDA, or no, she was with HUD. She was with Housing and Urban Development. She was talking about like grants or whatever. And she was just like, in Arkansas, you know, we have the largest population of Marshall Islanders outside of Marshall Island. And I'm the only one sitting in this whole damn thing. I'm like, well, how the fuck they get there? You know, you're just left wondering. And I'm like, well, we have all these projects to help them learn and to be better about it. And it's just like and I think that that's sort of the thing that we're all going to have to look at coming forward in this next year is that whatever these pop culture crunchy issues are going to be, I think Canada, I mean, Trudeau's out. I think that they're going to have I think the election is going to be heavily predicated on two things: Donald Trump and immigration. And they're interlinked. That's just going to be guaranteed. Does that mean that, Peter Paul, you know, is he going to be in? Is he most likely going to be the next prime minister of Canada, do you think? Okay.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then on top of that, you also have, I think in America, like we were talking about, like with all these crunchy issues, I mean, let's face it, like the tech centers behind all that, like the tech power, the Silicon Valley, PayPal, mafia, Californian ideology is there. And so whatever they want to make their money in, they'll find a technological solution to do it, whether that be with drugs, food processing, supply chain issues, homegrown, reindustrialization. That'll be in there for sure. I'm very, very skeptical about what that impact is going to have because, again, my sentiments and my politics are far more nativist. They're far more restrictionist. I would like to see millions leave, And for them, they're like, well, the immigration issue alone. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I guess that'll be the determining factors that we can all just sort of wait and speculate, kind of like what we have been doing. But until
I have two
then,
more pieces of Canadian news that I think you will find interesting, Semiogogue.
Go for it then, Gio.
Okay, number one, when Quebec, Peter Nemitz on Twitter, my good friend Peter Nemitz. I used to stick, like Pac-Man Respecter, I do a lot of deadlifts. I don't do as much squats. I'm terrible at squats, but anyways, two things. When it comes to Quebec, Trump has directly appealed to Bloc Québécois politicians over Trudeau's head. He's directly gone to Quebec. And there's been Quebec politicians that have went to Mar-a-Lago. That's number one. Number two, when it comes to a sovereignty issue over resources, because in Canada, the Indigenous people basically have their own governmental structure. The Indigenous in places like Alberta, where they have oil sands, they're now the Chicoms, they're directly appealing to the Indigenous people. This like Chinese Canadian Economic Development Board, where they're saying stuff like, you have a history of racism and oppression, and they're directly
and you are also like us. You are Mongols who come from Asia.
Yeah. So they are going over the federal government's head by using the autonomous Indigenous people to extract Canadian resources. And Trudeau can do nothing about it. By law, he can do nothing about it. Right? So I said this on the Cole Report. If you go to patreon.com/Giant Productions or Substack/Gio's Content Corner, I talk about this in depth about the whole issue with the Chicoms appealing to Canadian Indigenous groups to get their resources. And why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they? Right? By law, they can do it. They can't get taxed on it. They can hire whatever construction company to build pipelines and to build facilities that can extract oil sands, and the government can't do anything about it. So, why wouldn't the Chinese do it? If you were in the Politburo in China, wouldn't you do it? Come on, who fucking cares?
You have me asking some uncomfortable questions about my own job at work now, Gio, and I now need to do some research into what the Indians in my country can get away with. With respect to investment, because here's the thing. Like, if you work or if you're aware of how much money in infrastructure investment, like the Choctaws and the Chickasaw tribes in Oklahoma invest in, they got more money than the state of Oklahoma does in a shit ton of projects. Right. I mean, like, local towns in Oklahoma have to compete in like the CDBG process, their like own local grant state stuff, and they're not always going to get the money. And sometimes, due to how the supply chain issues have been, towns that want to redo like water or sewer projects that take millions of dollars, their original estimate, their budget projections for whatever is going to be like twice as much. So like $1.5 million projects now all of a sudden like a $3 million project. And then what does the state of Oklahoma tell them to do, or what does their local council of government tell them to do? Go to the tribes. Go to the tribes. Go to the tribes. And they've got more money than the Governor Stitt does. And so like that, and I mean, that's a very uniquely Oklahoma-based problem. But now it makes Gio saying all this, and it makes me wonder, well, how much money are they getting from the Chinese? Or if that's a problem.
No, but then you have like autonomous political forces outside of Canada's border influencing Canadian economies. Like with Trudeau, like with Trump going to Quebec, the Indigenous people going into business with the Chicoms. Like, do we have a fucking country anymore? I don't know. Like, it's, oh my God. But in terms of geopolitics, though, if you're an American, if you're Trump, listen, I'm not like one of these neocons that think the Chinese are like, real communists or whatever. Like, I'm not one of these like boomer China hawks, right? But, you still have to be skeptical. China has an immense power base here in the north. And that's just the reality. And it comes from years and years of Liberal Party mismanagement. And even, fucking Pierre Trudeau, he greeted Chairman Mao over Nixon's head. He said, fuck you to Richard Nixon. He went to China and he bowed to Mao Zedong. Did you know that, Semiogogue?
I did not.
Yeah.
I had no
Pierre
idea.
Trudeau went to China and bowed to Mao Zedong. And it's true. And Richard Nixon's
he went to China before
he
went to China before Nixon so famously went for his opening of relations and all
I
the
believe
rest.
so. He went a few years before Nixon opened up China.
Disgusting.
Yeah,
fucking
terrible.
Trudeau.
You
Well,
said Pierre did this?
Pierre did this, yes. There's photos with him and bowing to Chairman Mao. So
there's
October
one other
of
thing
1973, so that is before or after, actually.
after,
Nixon visit to China. Yeah, that was 1972, and that was already after a year and a half of backroom negotiations with Kissinger and others.
But I think what happened was the Nixon administration viewed it as a weakness by having Pierre go over there and being all chummy with Chairman Mao, whereas Nixon had this very austere disposition towards the Chinese. So, Trudeau, that was a big thing, right? Nixon was very pissed off at that, so what are you going to do?
Well, yeah, what's he going to do? He got driven out. One last thing I'd add on the picture of what's going to change in Canada, you have to look at them as one of the Five Eyes. You have to look at them as one of the, Anglosphere powers.
Yeah.
And those Anglosphere powers have been thoroughly locked up. Brexit was shut down. Australia is just a shocking shithole. New Zealand, against all odds, is worse. Canada is a wretched fucking dump because of the policies that have been imposed upon the people of these different places. And so I look at it as being very interesting from the perspective, I have this hypothesis that there is a deep state, and there's no question there is one because, particularly things like foreign policy, stuff Prude follows closely and the rest, there is a certain amount of consistency. And the only way you gain that consistency when different people come into office in sequence is by ensuring that there's a deep state to, so the State Department can be reliably depended upon to pursue policies beyond 2 or 4 year windows. So there's a deep state, and the deep state also is manifestly against Trump. It's a pretty convincing array of facts over the last, 4 or 8 years. That make it clear that we have these problems to deal with, that the deep state doesn't want him and will do everything within their power not to have him. But I hypothesize a deeper state, one that could sit back and say, it's just a hypothesis. I'm not saying it's necessarily the case, but they could sit back and say, yeah, actually it suits us for Biden to steal the election now so that we can do our whole adventure in Ukraine and, make some major moves for a greater Israel. And then we can bring Trump back in and say that, no, he really wasn't a part of all that. He really wasn't doing it. Don't you know they tried to kill him? So now we can get back in the game with a degree of plausible deniability about what happened in the interim. If you imagine that there's a deeper state like that, one of the things, if you're like me, that you have to engage in is speculation about what would make it the deeper state? And one obvious choice would be to say, well, it's been around longer. It has deeper relationships. It's wormed its way in deeper. Well, as best as I can tell, the fucking filthy Brits took over the United States in the Gilded Age, in the period starting with, after everything got settled with the recent unpleasantness with the War of Northern Aggression, or the war between the states, everything started to come together. You had people rising into positions of power like what's his name, JP Morgan. Tons of British investment comes in. You've got people like Carnegie, who's a Scotsman, right? You got people like the Astors going over to Britain and becoming, barons or whatever the fuck. And And so you have a Brit takeover in some respects. And when you look at the Carol Quigley stuff and the idea of all of that, you know, people like Rhodes and attempting their discussions and publications that covered the idea that Britain realizes it's about to go down. So what it needs to do is use the United States as a new center of gravity. So anyway, I'm getting too far into that. But the idea is that if there is a deeper state, you would expect it to live at the level of intelligence, to live at the level of extrajudicial intervention, to live at the level of the Five Eyes and the rest. And so there seems to be a really strong fight. Trump came in at the same time Brexit did. Brexit, of course, slightly before. Brexit was shut down. Those developments were retarded. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that because everyone will think I'm saying bad things about people with lower IQs. I mean, the process was slowed down. Brexit was not permitted to go through. The Brits were punished for even imagining they could do it. We saw all kinds of draconian measures in Australia and New Zealand. So if there is a deeper state, I would expect it to be tied to the old school Five Eyes. And to be tied to like the oldest elements of British and American intelligence. And so I would imagine, you know, when you look at attempts to offset the power of China with the Kanzuk stuff and the rest, I would expect to see some attempt to reassert control over the Anglosphere first, so that the projects could be carried forward. And so when we look at Canada, I'm like, wow, this would be, I mean, Britain still has not come out from under it in any way.
Yeah.
And Australia and New Zealand certainly haven't. So that leaves Canada as this next one. And Trump has come out of the gate swinging, doing all sorts of things that make Trudeau look more like the egregious imbecile he actually is. So if things do change in Canada, I mean, I try not to pay too much attention to it. I've hated the fucking Canadians ever since I went on my first European trip and they were all fucking running around with those Canadian flags on their backpack. And if anyone asked them if they're American, they'd go into this long fucking discourse about how they have nothing to do with that. I fucking hate Canadians. But if Canada is recovered in some sense, then that could be, I mean, first off, it's important because they share the world's largest land border, isn't it, with the US? And if they tip first, then you would have to imagine that there's going to be a domino effect with things like New Zealand and Australia, and you would see the old powers, I'm not saying they're good powers, reassert themselves through the Anglosphere first. Anyway, just an idea.
No, that's what Dimes is alluding to in the chat. He said that he's even skeptical of them shivving Trudeau in the back because if, like, first of all, Polyev isn't perfect, obviously, but I think Canada has like really gone off the chain into the sort of like newerly transnational progressivism, as I like to call it, that the Canadian model is not sustainable whatsoever. And so a lot of the older elites are sort of like looking at it and they're like, oh man, we really let Trudeau fuck things up. We got to do something about this. So you never know. I mean, there are a lot of like people like that either are Canadian bureaucrats or I said this in the core report. There's like these like weirdo like libtard Canadian accounts that they like. There's this one guy that he's like one of these fake glowies, kind of like that other fake glowy that lies about everything true. You know the one I'm talking about, you know, with the beard. He said like they have these theories that there's like this dark right-wing network trying to influence Canadian politics, and Pierre Poilievre's part of this dark right-wing Trump network, and you know, yeah. Well, like with Ezra Levant, that was actually true because he was funneling all these like e-celebs like Lauren Southern into the American market. But the thing is, though, the problem with that thesis is that it's semi-organic because if like you're on the political right in Canada, America's your audience. Canadians are not your audience. I mean, that things could change. These people would gladly sell you up the river for their unfounded sense of authority. Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. So there are like these people that have like these weirdo theories that the right wing is influencing Canada, and it's all bullshit, right? But like, it's not bullshit to the extent that if you are in the political right and like most of my audience is in America, most of the people that give me money, most of the people that hear what I'm saying is either in America or the UK. I have some fans in Europe. I have some fans in fucking Africa, believe it or not. I can't believe that. But no, it's like that's just the reality of living in Canada.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, of course I have fans in Africa. No, but
I wasn't gonna say it.
Yeah, you are hitting at a pertinent point, though. You are what's that Elon Musk quote? You are speaking the full truth. Was that the?
I don't know. Some people are saying that that's all Tom Luongo stuff, and I've seen his things, and there's a fair amount of it that I agree.
Well, Lyndon LaRouche as well talked about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of LaRouche in there as well.
The British
and
crown.
Quigley and people before him. But if anybody wants to get my take on it, I did not get it from Luongo. I don't disagree with much of what Luongo says. If anybody wants to get my take on the British influence on the United States, the first attempt I made to lay that out was with Apostolic Majesty and AA on a stream on the British Empire on AM's channels. So yeah, those dirty, perfidious fucking Brits.
I think one of the things, though, to look at in the context of like modern day Five Eyes is that when New Zealand had gotten a little closer to China and they had started, trying to, I guess, cool relations of sorts with Jacinda Ardern's government, was that, even America was like, well, maybe we can't share as much intel with you as we initially thought, which does illustrate a significant concern, because if on the geopolitical level, yeah, like Russia's an issue, but like your bigger long-term economic problem, as well as like just a geographic one in terms of the Pacific, the Middle East, Europe, investment, etc., it is going to be China. Like end of discussion. Yeah. And you cannot have a national security administration focus, which this administration seems to be more heavily, at least the incoming Trump administration has a lot more interest on internals and reindustrialization and retrenchment. And so with that respect, you have to do something about Canada, period. And I'm sure that there will be an American influence in the upcoming election in Canada, like just hands down. That's going to be a part of it. And it's going to have to be, because the United States is looking at this and being like, well, between the Indians and between the Ukrainians, and especially the Chinese and the ongoing issues that are there, Canada is a national security threat. Because the question is that you alluded to, Gio, at the beginning, was the question of sovereignty. And it's the same question I ask myself all the time about the United States as well, like between the cartels, between China, between Israeli influence as well. Like, where does American sovereignty lie in that question?
Yeah.
But I mean, all those things play a large role in with how foreign policy is going to be conducted in this incoming admin. And there will be a large degree of American influence in there in the election period. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Like the turning point USAification of like the Tories, Reform, and I'm sure the Conservatives, and
Canada,
and the PPC as well. Like that's all going to play a role. And they're going to be shrilling and shrieking as Polyev gets in there. And they're going to be like, well, look at this. Like, we even had our own version of Charlie Kirk or whatever. I think that there's going to be a huge issue.
Yeah.
Lefties will have their, like, blue anon, the Charlie Kirk network of Canadian influencers.
Yeah, apparently Weave is involved. Mike Cernovich is involved because he was dealing with Rebel Media.
Just kill me.
What is Worm Hatcher says? Lubovichers definitely could have tunneled into Canada. I don't know. Well, I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, if you look at the history of the most powerful families in Canada, I mean, the Laurentian elite was basically funded by a lot of like old world European aristocrats. And haven't the British been in like sort of like an economic war with China for like what 200 years now? So.
Yeah, and they've had concerns about containment. I mean, basically, there was a big discussion going on around the time of the Great White Fleet and Roosevelt the First, where the United States was going to project its power abroad. The Brits were like, I'm not sure if we back this. This could be a competing naval power. Britain is like, well, we need someone to police in the Pacific, and it's easier for the U.S. to do it with the Pacific coast. And there was this discussion about whether or not it would really be Japan that they focused on or the United States. Remember, around that time, British observers and advisors were heavily involved with the Japanese when they hammered the Russians in Port Arthur in the Russo-Japanese War. Yeah. And when Roosevelt's Great White Fleet sailed all over the place showing U.S. naval power, the only reason they could do it is because they didn't have coaling stations. And these are steamships at the time. So I think it was still steam at that point. But in any case, they needed coal to keep them running. And the only reason the U.S. could do its Great White Fleet tour was because of British coaling resources and and a accompanying fleet, sort of like camp followers that traveled with that fleet everywhere. So there was a decision made early on to use the United States as a part of containment for China on the part of the British. So yeah,
interesting.
They are interesting. Those Brits. They are cunning. I don't know where the locus of their planning is, but they're coal tenders. Yes,
yeah. Does China have a lot of native coal reserves, or no? They mostly get it from Russia, right?
Well, they've got a lot of coal-fire powered plants, but also they do have some coal reserves, but not as much.
Yes, but the coal is particularly shitty. It's not like good hard anthracite. It's this weird crumbly brown coal that's crap.
It's not like the coal you get like around Pennsylvania or around Alberta. Like it's the good shit. Yeah, it's more like
we got the good shit.
Well, that's also why there's been a renewed emphasis on Chinese investment into things like the lithium triangle and coal alongside the South American coast.
And they could just get it from Russia. So.
Going hard on it as well.
Yeah.
And they've got the beginning of oil reserves being developed now in Afghanistan. And by the way, Prude, since we've talked about it so many times in the past, the Taliban right now is making all kinds of squeaks and whistles about how they're finally building a road through the Wakhan corridor to connect them with Kashgar
exactly
and China.
What Brzezinski in the 90s did not let happen. Yeah,
called it like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, but to be fair, they've had real troubles putting in 40 kilometers of road, and after you get to this point where
you still have to deal with all those Turkmen Islamist groups as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and they, as soon as they get into the neighborhood of China, like the road ends, and they still have to drive on dirt roads and shit. So it's not there yet, but it's yes,
it's a start.
Coming.
It's a start.
Yeah, the Uyghurs, another CIA religion right there. Oh my God, submarinite coal. Speaking of submarinite coal, did you guys want to?
No, we can do that some other time. We are nearly at 3 hours, and I have to go to work in the morning, so we're going to move to the.
Yeah, I have. You were talking. There was a comment earlier in the chat about how French are the wild cards. No matter, in all things. I have a fucking French wife in the other house who's going to raise hell with me. I'm about to be in trouble.
So yes. So let's move to the super chats.
We
before
can
I get
talk
to
about Ukraine, but maybe next time.
Yeah, we can definitely. Oliver should definitely be a returning guest. But
well, they say that the winter. They say by Christmas there's always like an uptick in war because the ground becomes more solid in Ukraine. So we'll see what happens.
All right,
Gio. Increase, by the way, increase. We have
I have the talking gun, so let's move on to the super chat. Shall we?
All right, super chat.
Thank you.
Is there a talking gun?
Yes, there is, but I'm not going to show it on screen.
It's not the walking gun. It's the
no, it's a different one. But so we'll carry on there. But before I do, Oliver, where can people find you and your wonderful work?
Thank you. They can find me on YouTube. I have a number of streams with Prude. As a matter of fact, you can find me on his channel as well as on my own Semiogogue. You can find me on Telegram, though I'm using it less. BitChute, God help you. Odyssey seems to be screwed. But X primarily, and YouTube. For some reason, I have not yet been kicked to the curb on YouTube.
Well, thank God for that. And I do have your links down below in the description. So if my audience has not found you before, God knows that they should be subscribed to you and listen to all the wonderful work that you do. So I want to get started with the super chats that are here on YouTube. The entropy link is the pinned comment in the chat, as well as in the replies to the Twitter stream on X. I'd recommend that you donate there instead, because that takes less of a cut. You're not giving Google your money, but we'll start here at the top. Willie McDuff says, the very fact that we all understand what Gio means by programming socks is devastating. That is very true. Very true.
Oh, man.
Willie McDuff says geocatastrophism. Yes.
The spinal catastrophe.
And the geo trauma that comes with that. It's very real. Robert Weisenfeld says, Trudeau's father is Pierre, huh? It's the running gag. I'm a fan of it. But then he sends a larger one for $19.99. Thank you very much, Mr. Weisenfeld. He says, requesting Prude do the Kissinger monologue on whether you... give me a second. I will do it. Robert.
Start a color revolution.
I need to do the voice. I need to get into the voice.
You know what's funny is that Leaf Libs actually believe that the trucker protest was a color revolution in Canada by America. So,
you know,
I want to hear a kind of Kissinger voice.
It's a challenge, Mr. President. I know that we're very busy right now trying to open up China, but you know the Chinese are in our backyard. This Trudeau government, I know, is very problematic, and I think that it raises an important question about whether or not we should start Quebec war nationalists and separatists. We could run guns through the Irish and the Irish Republican Army. Yes, we could do that in Quebec and get the Catholic Church back in charge. I think that it should be done, and that the cold reserves will be good. We get the Chinese out, and we've managed to contain the Trudeau government right where we want them. I don't really recommend a color revolution inside of Canada, but and I don't want to annex them either, because that means like what? How many provinces are in Canada, Gio?
11.
11. Yeah, it's like 11 new Democrat states. Fuck that.
No,
we need to send
Alberta would vote Republican.
Yeah, but that's one province out of the ones that you just listed.
Well, maybe Saskatchewan.
Do you really see part for a second? Do you really see local distance from Saskatchewan voting for Trump?
Oh, probably not.
Yeah,
you're
no.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
You should just do what we did in Saskatchewan. And I'm like, sir, there are metropolitan areas in the state of Texas larger than the population of Saskatchewan. Tell me more about political reality.
Yeah, Dallas-Fort Worth area is definitely more popular.
Yeah, like just tell me how I can really change.
No, Catherine Respecter, I do not have Cushing syndrome. My legs are very thick, and my legs are like tree chunks. So I just had to point that out.
Let that mental image stay in your mind for a little bit, folks. We'll tune in next.
Senator for $10.
He gives a salute. He says, cheers, gents. It's been good to see Semiogogue doing so many streams lately, and I love the stream title. Yes, that is the lengthy conversation. William McDuff just says, hi, art for $9.99. I greatly appreciate that. And that's what we're here for.
That's right. I have to buy a Koofy hat now.
Yeah, you have to buy a Koofy hat now. It's true.
I could buy
just don't give the Canadians American citizenship. That's very true.
Wait, what the fuck is a Koofy hat?
Yeah,
you're not woke, Semiogogue. Come on.
What's a Koofy hat?
It's like the African, like woke, like Nation of Islam.
Finally, Gio embraces his roots.
All right, I'm gonna find out right now.
No.
History leaks its XXL large pro.
Ah!
Yeah, I know. That's scary.
There will be none of that. Gio is not allowed. I have some Italian blood, and that would shame me if he ever wore such.
Not allowed. Not allowed.
I don't know. I'm thinking of if it's cheap on Amazon. I'm thinking of buying one for the meme. I don't know.
Good lord.
Extra large Koofy hat.
we can replace your little Gio Pepe Apustaya.
You mean this one? Where is it?
Yeah, replace the fez with the Koofy hat. There you go. But all right, on to the super chats from Entropy. Sam153 says, awesome Geopole trio. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Sam153.
Merry Christmas.
Greatly appreciate it. Seneca sends his usual weekly super chat. We're very thankful for you, Seneca, always letting us know about the great lore and history of the state of Missouri. He says, Missouri lore. I find it really funny that St. Louis and St. Charles used to have a massive rivalry going on during the colonial days. St. Charles was thought to be full of morally loose backwater hicks, and St. Louis was full of elitist pricks. I always love reading about these regional rivalries. Well, there you go. And then Sam153 says, for the record, he's doing the actually bit here. Civilization 4 was the last good game in the series. Civ 5 and 6 have that hexagonal spaces where you can't stack units, and which sucks. Well, I played Civ 5. It was the first one I played. I've played other 4X games like Sins of the Solar Prophets and other things like that. But I guess there you go. I should go back and play the earlier games. That is for sure. But let me go refresh Entropy here real quick and make sure. Oh, nope, I just missed one. Yes. So this is from Owen Zaleski, although he has his name here on on Entropy. He says, Semi hates anime girls. There you go. Yeah, so he says, hello, gents. I'm not
so disgusting.
Well, he's done some art, fan art of the show in the past, which he actually talks about here. He says, hello, gents. No DH hand drawing tonight out of respect for the esteemed guest. And thank you on my behalf as well. Hope you are all well. Do you guys like buying gifts or making gifts more for Christmas? I love painting gifts for my family and friends. And then he says, Gio, please do more art streams. God bless. Well, it depends, I suppose, on who I'm making it for. But I mean, I typically will buy gifts depending on what they had. So, for instance, my brother has just graduated from college with 2 degrees in physics and in engineering. And he's got a really cool job at Los Alamos for his first job out of college. I'm really happy and proud of him. I bought him a really old, well, it's not old, but I bought him from a secondhand bookstore, the completed collection of all of Richard Feynman's lectures that he ever gave on physics. So I hope he really likes that. So, I mean, I think it helps to buy things that you know will be there and that you do it for love. But if you're capable as like a craftsman or an artist or a tradesman, if you can make something for them, I think that always goes a pretty long way. It just totally depends on the person. What about you, Gio? Have you ever painted or made anything as gifts?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's just even handing out woodcuts. I'm searching for I think I found the right kufi on Amazon. It's only $15.
Fuck.
So I'm gonna probably buy it. I can't help myself. I have to buy this. I promised people, and now I have to do it. So
it's one of these like yellow and green and red.
Yeah.
Embroidered
The Hotep kufi. Yeah. Oh my god. Oh, that's gonna be so funny when I see it on DA next episode.
We need to get Gio to like move along. I remember move along to some new elements for his wardrobe. I remember being in Istanbul looking at the old cemeteries, and on the headstones in the cemetery, they would have a little carved depiction, a sculpture of the headdress that the person wore in life, because the headdress was a sign of rank and station. So you'd have very often a fez carved into sort of the top of the gravestone, but they also had the fez with the turban wrapped around it. And so what I think Gio needs to get into is the fez in the center, but the turban around the fez. Just this sort of massive presence, you know? And those turbans can get huge. You know, it would be very cool if like the entire top half of the screen was this giant fucking turban, like something out of the Turk's wardrobe in the Adventures of Baron Munchausen by Gilliam. You know,
that was like Fritjof Schuon used to have a bunch of those like weird wardrobes from like the world religions, and he used to always go around with the turban, and you know, so yeah.
Well, there you go.
There's this great essay I've been reading lately called "On the Schuon Cult" by Mark Kozlow. Very weird shit, but you know, it is what it is. Maybe I'll do a content mining on it one day. Where's Gio keeping all his e-girls? Mufti Gio.
He eats them.
God, you guys are gonna laugh where the kufi. Hopefully it fits my head.
He eats them. That's what happens. But Machiavelli sucks, and he says, "Oh, and he changed his name to being white is great." So true. You know, it was really funny. I had some Mormons over yesterday. They had knocked on my door. We had a lengthy conversation. Very interesting. I might write or do a little rant about it, but I like the fact that they once had in their scriptures or whatever, you know, that like the future inhabitants of his tribe or whatever would be white and delightsome. They had to change that part of the
delightsome.
I like that. I should put that in my Twitter bio, white and delightsome. But anyways, he says for $4.99, he says Merry Christmas. Well, Merry Christmas indeed, and I hope that everyone enjoys that wonderful feast of nativity. But with that being said, Gio, what do you've got going on, or what content have you been making?
Well, I came out with a Cole Report, episode 8, where I go in depth on Syria, the Canadian politics thing, and also the stupid fucking Lily Phillips thing, which I think is ridiculous. But I have more
is that the 100 one?
Yeah, the 100 one. But I have more of like a Landsharkian male feminist pro-woman take on that great tragedy. So, yeah, I talk a bunch about that.
Now, a square kilometer of dick is actually a good thing by Gio.
No, that's a bad thing, but from like a pro-woman perspective. And, you know, of course, I insult a lot of people. I'm more salty on content on a Cole Report. And I'm thinking of doing a content minded on the essay Darwin Among the Machines, but also relating it to a lot of my readings with Agamben and so forth. I've been trying to do a lot more YouTube shorts as well. Catherine says I should just go on TikTok and like, you know, bite the bullet, but you never know. If I'll probably get banned on TikTok if I went there, but or I'll probably, garner some like unwanted leftoid attention. But yeah, so all my links are down below. Please, if it's only $5 a month, it's $5 Canadian. It's not, it's nothing. You Americans with your superior dollar, I'm just a poor
superior everything.
I love when someone called JD Vance a poor F slur, and he's like, "That's the first time I felt represented." that was funny. Or when someone said that JD Vance grew up listening to A Perfect Circle, I'm like, yes, that's exactly us, like Chudlennials right there, listening to A Perfect Circle. That was pretty funny. I forget who posted that. Yeah. But too bad we didn't get to talk about the shooter woman, but
I think it's probably for the best that we don't. It's more shit unfolds. I'm going to give that a 72.
People are going to war on the timeline. It's like, your favorite E-celeb caused this. No, your favorite E-celeb caused this.
Yeah, I'm more on the line that Woe has on this issue, which is pretty straightforward. That you can have your blood feuds on the timeline, but what's been normalized is just radical online gender shit, but also that shooting white Christian children is being cheered on by the worst fucking people on earth. So I think that's the thing that really matters in this focus.
I lean on the side that she was mentally ill and she had a terrible childhood, and that matters more than any ideological consideration and why she did it. It's tragedy. So
I would agree wholeheartedly that it certainly is tragic. But with that being said, I have everyone's links down below in the description. I don't think we'll have an episode next week just due to it being Tuesday, and that'll be Christmas Eve. So we'll probably pick up
maybe later in the week. We'll see what happens.
Maybe later in the week or the week after. It just depends on what we've got to do. But yeah, so we'll be back when we'll let you know when we'll be back. I've got some content in the pipeline as well with some recordings and some essays to put out. And of course, Oliver, our wonderful guest, your links are down below in the description. And we'll see you all next time.
God bless. Goodbye. Too sweet.
See you, gents.